15 seconds. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. and call on Councillor Longo to read the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city of Thorold is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hadawendarunk, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The city of Thorold stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live.
Thank you, Councillor Longo. Are there any declarations of interest? Go ahead, Councillor Sentence.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, 12.3 CAO 11-2023. I'm an employee with BioVille.
CAO 11- what? 2023. Okay, we've duly noted that.
Thank you.
Okay, adoption of the agenda. Can I get a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda? I got Councillor DeRose, seconder, Councillor D'Angelo. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Adoption of the minutes. Can I get a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes? I got Councillor Sentence and Councillor Decker. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Mayor's report. On Thursday, June 22nd, I attended and spoke at the grand opening of Niagara Port Services, a supply chain company located in the Thorold Multimodal Hub. A full-stack transloading and warehousing services company, NPS is focused on developing an open and competitive market to service increasing supply chain needs and bring new opportunities to the region. Ken Schultens, Manager of Economic Development, joined me at this event. On June 24th, I attended and spoke at Walker Niagara Campus Appreciation Day. This event was held at Walker Industries corporate headquarters on Thorold Town Line Road. I was joined by Niagara Falls Mayor Jim Diodati, Walker Industries President and CAO Jordy Walker, and many other staff. This event was held to show area residents what Walker Industries operations are all about. There were facility tours and information sessions as part of this event. On Monday, June 26th, I attended the Thorold Secondary School 2023 commencement ceremony held at the Performing Arts Center in downtown St. Catharines. This was the 149th celebration. I presented the City of Thorold Mayor's Award to Amina Khalid and the City of Thorold Council Recognition Award to Miriam Adnan. On Tuesday, June 27th, Deputy Mayor DeRose attended the Dennis Morris Catholic High School 2023 graduation ceremony held at the Central Community Center on York Road in Niagara-on-the-Lake. On Thursday, June 29th, I attended and spoke at the citizenship ceremony held at the Thorold Community Activities Center, Group Basciano Center on Richmond Street. 25 new Canadian citizens from 10 countries took their oath of citizenship in a very moving ceremony presided over by Citizen Judge Rochelle Ivory, who administered the oath of citizenship and presented certificates of citizenship. I was joined by Niagara Centre MP Vance Badaway, Niagara Centre MPP Jeff Birch, Executive Director of the TCAG Megan Gilchrist, and Councillor Sentence. On June 26th, Thorold Fire and Emergency Services held their volunteer firefighter graduation ceremony at Fire Station 2. 13 recruits finished a rigorous 6-month training program, graduated, and are now ready for on-call duty. Training Captain Pittaway and Fire Chief Terry Dixon presided over the ceremony and handed out their fire helmets. The graduates are Cameron DiPietro, Alex Hall, Brett Saxton, Brett Parker, Garen Burns, Kevin Den Hollander, Matthew Hunter, Nicholas Phelps, Quinton Paul, Ryan Lozon, Thomas Waldeck, Tyrus Beckford Leon, and Zachary Van Veen. Kevin Denhalder received the Ted Lucas Award for exceptional performance during training. On behalf of City Council, congratulations to the 2023 graduates. This fall, Thorold Fire and Emergency Services will start looking for new recruits, and we look forward to seeing those recruits graduate next spring. On Friday, June 30th, I attended and spoke at the grand reopening of the Rexall Drugstore located in the Pine Plaza. I was joined by Councillor Sentence, Regional Councillor Whalen, MP Jeff Birch, and Economic Development Manager Ken Schultens. On behalf of City Council, I would like to thank Rexall for their commitment to the City of Thorold. The Lock 25 designation, located in the Battle of Beaver Dams Park in front of the amphitheater, took place on July 1st as part of the day's event. Heritage Thorold Chair Anna O'Hare presided over the ceremony. Historian Sarah King Head gave the history and overview regarding the Lock 25 designation. MPP Jeff Birch, Regional Councillor Whalen, and I brought remarks as well. We were joined on stage by Councillors D'Angela, O'Hare, Decker, Sentence, and D. Dividitis, and CAO Manoj Dalwaria. This was the 54th designated property in the City of Thorold and supports the city's cultural heritage goal and objectives to identify, conserve, and enhance its significant cultural heritage resources for the benefit of future generations. Canada Day Rock and Blues on the Battlefield, held on July 1st and 2nd in the Battle of Beaver Dams Park, was an excellent two-day event. There was a record crowd on July 1st, which ended with an outstanding fireworks display, and the show continued on July 2nd despite the rain. Once again, thank you to city staff, especially Tessa Bonacore, Carrie Gruel, Megan McCrae, Steve Santo, Dave Baldoni and their teams, and the Special Events Committee, which Councillor Decker sits on. Bob Liddycoat, who booked the bands, and our sound team of Frank and Ray, and our amazing sponsors. We look forward to next year and making continued improvements to this event. On Wednesday evening, Farmers Market continues to see more vendors and bigger crowds each week, and the Thorold Reed Band provides an excellent evening of music. Thank you, City staff and Councillors O'Hare and Dividitis, who have gone above and beyond each week, even acting as chefs and flipping burgers. The market runs from 5 to 9 every Wednesday evening throughout the summer, and the Thorold Reed Band performs from 7:30 to 9 in the band shell. And I think that, Councillor O'Hare, you want to add something regarding that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes. First off, I just want to say very heartfelt thanks to staff, Jeff Holman, Dave Baldoni, and especially to Jacob Tedesco, who puts his heart and soul into the success of this market. I also want to point out that thanks to Councillor Didavidis' great idea to get our startup of the market going with a food concession stand, our T&M burger flipping joint, he decided or came up with the idea that we should offer food in the beginning. We didn't have quite enough vendors to supply the need for all the visitors of the park. So Mike came up with this idea. We jumped in, and I'm happy to say we raised $320 that is going to go to small-scale farms to purchase groceries that will be given back to the community. So thank you, Chef, for the great idea and your support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor O'Hare and Councillor Didavitis. I'd also like to call on Councillor DeRosa, who wants to say a few words about the soccer camp. Go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. It's the 34th year we're running the Super Soccer School, longest running camp in Thorold Sports Camp. I just want to thank Parks workers and acting manager Dave Baldoni. The park's impeccable. Everything's great. We're really happy. Thanks for going out of your way to the extra touches on the field. The kids notice it, the parents notice it. And just a big thank you to park staff. Thank you.
Thank you. And in closing, I just want to add that in-person on-site services resume at Lakeview Cemetery. In order to provide enhanced customer service to the community, the City of Thorold has installed a trailer at the cemetery to function as a short-term office space until renovations to the building are complete. The Lakeview Cemetery temporary office is now open Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And that's the end of my mayor's remarks. Up next, we have presentations and requests from Thorold Legion directional signage. I'll call on Ken Smolko, Executive Committee member from the Thorold Legion, for his presentation. Go ahead, Ken. Is the mic on?
Sorry,
Is
Ken,
your
let's
mic
just make
on?
sure your mic
Press
is on.
the button there and.
Oh. Yeah, just to remind
There you
people
go.
that I actually have a
There.
name, it's not Smokey. So I'm here for the Legion. We're looking for 6 to 7 street signs. We're looking for funding from the city to help get the word out that we actually have a Legion in the city of Thorold. The last prices I've got were about $110 a sign, and Public Works had a cost of 7 signs was $400 for installation. And I know I've only got 10 minutes here, so I'm going to keep on going. My quick little presentation is going to be on about 3 parts. It's going to be about the community and the Legion, what the Legion actually does for our veterans, the projects that we actually have on the go at this present time at your branch 17, and then where the Legion is, we see the Legion going in the future. So the community needs to be involved with the Legion. That's why then we need the signs. With the city growing, how many people in the city actually know we have a Legion branch in the city? I know that if you lived in the city for as long as I have, we all know that there's a Legion, but with the city growing, these signs will put the Legion in the forefront. What we do, the more community members we get in the Legion, the more funds we can raise, the more projects we can perform to help our veterans. The more people that are not members that come into the Legion, we have potential of getting new members, and new members will bring new volunteer opportunities for the Legion to expand. So it's basically every single sign that you provide us it's a snowball effect that it's unlimited growth that the Legion can have just by providing us with those signs. But the biggest project we have is our veterans. That's what the Legion is for. I know that the history of the Legion is that a lot of people think that the Legion is not as relevant as it used to be. With the World War II veterans and the Korean veterans passing away quickly, some people think that the Legion is not as relevant. Well, I'm hoping by the time we get done this little presentation that you see the Legion is just as relevant now today as it was years ago. There are about approximately 650,000 veterans in this country. Those numbers are a little old. We're probably looking closer to 700,000 veterans in this country right now. 10,000 veterans are leaving or being discharged from the military yearly. So that's 10,000 new veterans joining the military every year. The way the Legion helps our veterans is we are a very unique organization. You could almost say one of a kind. The Royal Canadian Legion has federal legislation which just allows us to act as representatives for our veterans in cases involving Veterans Affairs Canada. So every veteran that sees one of your signs can walk into the Legion and ask for help. So Mr. Mayor, you being a veteran, if you were a veteran, one of our 650,000 veterans in this country, you could walk in the Legion and say, I'm a veteran, I need help. So now that you've seen the sign, you found the Legion, you walk in, you ask for help, you'll sit down with our service officer. The branch service officer will interview you, find out what you need, and if it is basically a small branch-sized problem, we have poppy funds that we can to help you out with. We can help you out almost instantly as soon as we get your confirmation of service. If it's a bigger problem like a pension problem or a medical problem, that's when the federal legislation comes in. Your file will go to provincial service officer. Provincial service officer will look into your files. The Legion does offer assistance to military veterans. We also offer assistance to RCMP members, Merchant Marine, and if you're a police officer and you served in training missions in certain parts of this world, then there is benefits for you there too. But I'm always going to go back to these signs. The signs are needed so our veterans can actually find the branch. With our homeless veterans program, there's been veterans we've talked to that have not wanted any help, not wanted any help, not wanted any help. All of a sudden they want help. Seeing this sign might be a trigger for them to come in and ask for help. Your branch over the since before COVID has been the center for several large projects. We've been the center for the PTSD support for military corrections, first responders with the Oath Takers group. Oath Takers is a very unique organization also. The two folks that run the Oath Takers actually have PTSD and they have served. The other big project we have is the Valhalla group, which the same two gentlemen run. It is a service dog program for PTSD. It's the same group. It's first responders, military, corrections. We have recently actually had the helmets to hard hats at the branch. With the helmets to hard hats is not actually a Legion project. It's a gentleman who runs it, and what he does is he provides training for veterans. So the group that was at the Legion, your Thorold Legion, got their working at heights, they got their health and safety, they got their WMIS, so now they can go transition from military life into civilian life. We've also had at our little meeting there, which again, people found our meeting because they would find it easier if there was signs pointing towards the Legion, was a military veterans wellness group, which I'll touch on at the very end. But the biggest project we have right now is Operation Leave the Streets Behind. Jeannie and I are the center of the project at Branch 17. This is another reason we need these signs. These veterans are on the streets. All they might need is a trigger to ask for help. They might just see a street sign and then present themselves at the branch. They can walk into the branch and, as in our veteran mayor, ask for assistance. We confirm their service, and we have ways of getting instant resources to them. The resources that the Royal Canadian Legion has is actually mind-boggling. We have unlimited resources to help our veterans. But these folks need to be able to find us. That's where the street signs come in. We've had several meetings for Operation Leave the Streets Behind over the years, and it's like I said, these folks would find us a little bit easier with the street signs, but the groups we've had were involved with the Operation Leave the Streets Behind is the NEMS community, Niagara Emergency Medical Services Community Outreach is the very first people we've contacted. But we've also got Gateway, Start Me Up. We're involved with Salvation Army, Heart Niagara, Community Care, the Toolbox Project. We've recently received veterans information from Port Cares and Project Share in Niagara Falls. Again, these veterans need to be able to find us. The street signs are essential for anybody who's on the streets looking for assistance. the street sign, like I said, and I'll keep on going on about this, could be just the trigger that they need to be able to to find us. Because the Royal Canadian Legion is not Department of Defense, and we are not Veterans Affairs. We are there to help them. We will follow their file along, and we will fight for them at no cost to them. So that's where we are at this point. That's the projects we have on the go at this time. The future for the Royal Canadian Legion here, your Royal Canadian Legion Thorold, is unlimited. The sky's the limit. Since COVID, we're hoping to get the oath takers back in person at the branch. The Valhalla group with their dog program, I'm hoping they're back. I think that the guy cleaning the hall upstairs probably doesn't hope they come back, but they seem to leave a lot of hair around. And I think Tim probably wouldn't be too upset if they weren't there either. So, but we look to increase our support for the homeless veterans. Our meeting that we had, that seminar that Diane Condon chaired, had a police officer, his name was Jeremy Burns. He showed up. He has the Military Veterans Wellness Program.
I'm going to ask you to start wrapping up because you have under a minute.
Holy smokes already. Okay, so basically, our biggest problem with the homeless veterans is housing. But that's a political issue, and it's got nothing, there's nothing I can actually do about it right at this very second. But I'll in closing, I'll just say that a personal note, as long as our government is sending our men and women in uniform from the best place in this world to the worst places, the Thorold Legion will be here to help them when they come home. And if one veteran sees one sign, makes his way to the branch, and gets the help they need, how many signs is that actually worth? If we get them squared away and we get them back on the track, whether it be PTSD, substance abuse, if they see one sign, how many signs is changing somebody's life? How much is that worth? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kent. And I'd like to open the floor for questions from council. Okay, so go ahead, Councillor Sentence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, obviously a great organization for what you do. I think you missed, maybe you said it and I missed it, minor baseball, minor sports that you support, stuff like that. It's endless. Are we able to make a motion on this to ask staff to work with them to get the signage and the funding? And
yep. So what I would recommend through you, Mr. Mayor, is that council put forward a motion just seeking more information from staff on costs and what have you for council's consideration.
Okay, I'd like to do that.
So that's a motion. Yep. Can I get a seconder? I got Councillor D'Angelo seconding that. Are you done?
I'm good. Thanks for everything.
Did you? And your hand was up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's what I was going to do, is just make a motion that we refer this to staff and work with the members of the Legion in terms of location, cost, and what can be done about this. First of all, I want to thank you and all those that serve our country to make it the best place in the world. Sometimes we forget about that, but this is a good reminder for us. And seeing those Legion signs, I think, will play a key role in our community, as Councillor Sentence mentioned. I know you spoke here about helping the veterans, and you do a great job at that, but the Legion is so much more to our community. They sponsor local baseball teams, sports. They do stuff like public speaking contests, so they're developing our youth that are coming through the school systems.
I didn't have time to go through everything.
I'm going to go through a few, just helping you out here. These are some of the things I've seen over the years that the Legion's done. They do student bursaries, community events. You're there, Remembrance Day, Decoration Day, and at other events too throughout our community. I know you work with the Canadian Corps on those projects too, which is great. Again, reminding us of the importance of the sacrifices that were made for this country. The other thing too that sometimes you don't get credit for is the outreach in terms of working with the Northeast Post, the U.S. sister Legion in a manner of speaking. how they come to Thorold, promoting Thorold as a community outside of Canada, and having such a positive image, because I know there's been baseball tournaments, there's been reciprocating ceremonial events that have come back and forth, like the War of 1812, all different things. So the Legion, to me, is such a great community organization. Anything we can do to help you, to make sure that people of Thorold know that you're here and can get excited and can help out. So I think anything we can do would be great. And I look forward to the staff report.
So we got a motion for the staff report and to come back, and I had a mover, Councillor Senton, seconder, Councillor D'Angelo. Any further questions before I call the vote? Go ahead, Councillor.
I just wanted to thank Ken also. We've had some great times there with the elementary school speech contest, and just pleasure to be there, pleasure to go there for Stag and Doze and watch a band. Thank you, and I will support this 100%. I know we're not at that point yet, but
No.
thank you.
So motion is on the floor. We had a mover and a seconder. Is there any discussion with the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Ken, thank you for coming, and you did a great job.
I started to dry up a little bit, so
And I want to thank you and the Legion for all you do in our community, and we look forward to report coming back.
thank you. The service officer stuff, that was just a scratch the surface. Like the services that we provide are just absolutely mind-boggling, and it's even after all the years that we've been doing the homeless veterans thing, it just all of a sudden we find something new, like the Zone B hospital funds. We've dipped into those. There's the Navy benevolent funds. There's Soldier Aid Commission. There's so much that our veterans can access if they see us and if they can find us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, up next we have Asset Management Plan, non-core assets. Chris Vanderhayden, Manager of Asset Management Advisory, PSD Citywide Incorporated. I'll call on him for the presentation. Is this on Zoom? This will be by Zoom, this presentation. Is this dead?
So I just wanted to confirm a couple things that everybody can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. And you can see the 2023 Asset Management Plan slide on your screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for having me today. I know I have 10 minutes. There's a lot to cover here. So without any hesitation, we will get right into this. And so first of all, this is the 2023 Asset Management Plan that has met the requirements. And I just have to get there we go. Met the requirements for your 2024 OREG 588-17 requirements here in the province of Ontario. Before I get into the asset management, just a little bit of background about myself. My name is Chris Vanderhayden, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. You hit the nail right on the head with the way to pronounce my last name, which most people don't get, so thank you very much for that. I've worked with PSD Citywide now for almost 8 years, and I do come from a municipal and private sector background. So I worked with Oxford County for many years in the city of Woodstock in many different capacities. So as I had mentioned, through this project, the city of Thorold and PSD Citywide have been collaborating for a number of years now, including the 2020 Asset Management Plan for core infrastructure. For the current project, we developed an AMP that was compliant with the second phase of the OREG 588-17 regulation for AMPs and integrated comprehensive building condition assessments that we also incorporated into this asset management plan, which was a huge undertaking. There's a lot of information, a lot of data. As part of the current project, we held supporting workshops with staff covering these 4 areas that you see on the screen, which is inventory data refinement, risk and criticality analysis, lifecycle strategies, and levels of service. So why the need for municipal asset management? Well, I think this slide just sums it up. Infrastructure assets are vital for communities. It provides services to our tax and ratepayers, but also provides a quality of life beyond others to our residents as well. So just kind of high level overview of what is asset management. From an ISO 55000 perspective, it's a coordinated activity to realize value from an organization's assets, and it's a balance of performance, cost, and risk. But really, at the end of the day, it boils down to the services or levels of service that you provide to your community. What does asset management involve? Well, if you think about all of the asset portfolio or assets that you own, so those are every single asset for core, non-core infrastructure. This asset management plan is non-core. Then you have to have an asset management system. We rely on technology today to do a lot of the outputs and give us a lot of the outputs for these reports, which then also involves asset management, all the best practices around asset management, risk analysis, life cycle analysis, levels of service, financial forecasting, and so on. But the most important piece is the managing the organization. It's the culture within your organization to undertake asset management, the leadership, and that is not just your senior members of your senior management team. It's also your elected officials and also yourself, Mayor, and also the knowledge that goes into asset management. So just an overview, typical asset management journey, and we'll talk about Thorold's journey here shortly. Really, it's the assessment phase. What is the state of our current asset management awareness, cognizance, and capacity? Once you understand what your maturity level is within asset management, then you can start to plan. And planning is, looking at those key data initiatives, condition assessments, and key EM processes. From there, once all this is put in place, which we did through this project, then you can actually implement your asset management program and execute it through an asset management plan, but then also measuring and monitoring and benchmarking for years to come in the future. So asset management at the City of Thorold, an asset management plan was developed in 2013. In 2019, the City of Thorold met the first requirement under the OREG 588 regulation here in Ontario, and that was an asset management policy adopted by Council. 2021 asset management plan for core infrastructure. There was a update or a strategic plan issued in 2022, and now the asset management plan for non-core infrastructure for the 2023 OREG requirement. It's actually 2024. 2021 and 2023 were pushed out because of COVID, so now it is 2022 and 2024 requirements. So if we look at the inventory is the driver behind your asset management plan. And if you look at the main things that go into that inventory, we're looking at your TCA, which came from your PSAB 3150. So that's your tangible capital assets, your condition assessments against those assets, life cycle strategies and risk framework analysis and documentation, and also staff, consultant, and market data all goes into this asset management inventory. So if we look at where you're at in the City of Thorold as far as the OREG is concerned, we already talked about the 2019 requirements that you met, 2022 requirements, and now the 2024 requirements that you've also now have met through this plan once adopted. And then the next step is the 2025 OREG requirement, and that's for all asset categories. And within the current asset management plan, you define your current levels of service. But for 2025, you have to define what your proposed levels of service are, a 10-year plan with a financial plan to now achieve that target levels of service that you have defined within your municipality. So that's that next round coming up. So updating, reviewing, and public posting. After 2025 plan that I just spoke about, asset management plans must be updated every 5 years, every 5 years thereafter. The data must be within 2 years current of that asset management plan. Also, municipal council shall also conduct an overview or review that asset management plan every year for 5 years until you update the plan, and review the progress that is being made through your target levels of service. And if they're not being met, then a new strategy or plan needs to be put in place, or revisions to that plan going forward. The asset management policy plan should also be posted to your municipal website. So now let's talk about the plan. So what is the current state of municipal infrastructure and assets? These are the questions that we answer through an asset management plan. Gives you a wealth of knowledge and information. What process improvements can increase the confidence in analysis and decision making? So that's BCAs, building condition assessments, asset assessments, and so on. And what is the city's financial capacity to meet those long-term requirements? So at a high level, the City of Thorold in non-core assets own approximately $120.4 million in non-core assets as broken out in the screen. What does that really mean to the public? Well, if we look at that from a household perspective, each household within the City of Thorold has $12,100 stake in non-core infrastructure stock, meaning this is where your taxes are going for your non-core infrastructure. It's significant, not as significant as core infrastructure, but it's still a significant amount. Replacement cost, very important to have updated replacement cost based on current replacement values. And as we can see here, the main categories within your non-core assets have been using defined replacement costs, which is great because it makes up the majority of those replacement costs. So facilities was huge for the BCAs, land improvements, fleet and fleet equipment. Machinery and equipment, we're relying on zero current industry standard replacement cost or industry replacement costs. So there's some improvement to be made there. If we look at a high level view of the condition of the non-core assets, in a nutshell, 80% of the non-core assets are in fair or better condition. This is a really good story. I see many different assessments throughout Canada. I work with municipalities from Newfoundland right out to Vancouver and Victoria, and this is a really good news story compared to other municipalities that I've worked with. Asset portfolio assessed condition. So we are relying on a lot of good assessed condition on assets from facilities, land improvements, so that's your parks and recreational assets and other machinery equipment and fleet equipment. And 96% of all assets have assessed condition. Again, from a performance perspective, from my experience with other municipalities, most municipalities aren't even close to this with their non-core assets. So now we get into those long-term forecasted capital requirements. And really what this equates to is that on an annual basis, the City of Thorold needs $4.7 million annually to be able to become sustainable in the future to meet all the needs of all assets within the non-core inventory. If we look at the funding analysis, simply put, your annual capital requirement is $4.7 million. Your funding available today, and I want to stress that this is based on sustainable funding sources only. So for asset management plans in Ontario cannot include one-time transfers, grant funding that comes from senior levels of government from time to time that are not sustainable. So this is based on only sustainable revenue, which is basically taxes. And you have funding available of $1.3 million, which leaves an annual deficit of $3.3 million and translates into a 19.1% increase, tax increase. But that may seem like a big number, but the next slides are going to show you a little bit different story. So if we look at your annual reinvestment rate, so this is directly related to your levels of service from an economic perspective. Your actual reinvestment rate today is 1.1%. And your target reinvestment rate based on what your needs are should be 3.9%. And the calculations are on the bottom of the screen, which you can refer to later. But really, when we look at a strategy, a financial strategy to meet this sustainability, it's not as bad a picture as it seems. That 19.1% is over the course of 15 years. And what that equates to is 1.2% tax increase annually for the next 15 years to become fully sustainable within the non-core assets within the City of Thorold. That 1.2% increase, if you compare it to inflation, it's not even at inflation. So it's not a bad story. And in comparison, again, to many municipalities I've worked with throughout Canada, that 1.2% is some of the lowest percentages I've seen in increases across the country. I've seen increases between 2 and 4%, and in some cases over 4 and 5% to meet sustainability needs. So what I'm saying is Thorold is performing very well. You're doing a very good job at managing your assets and your funding that goes with it. So next steps, it's just continue to review and refine your asset inventory in consultation with internal departments and stakeholders. Make sure your data is up to date. When we start looking at the new requirement in the province of the CRVs, which is your capital replacement values, they have to match your asset management plan. So these numbers are more important now than ever. Conduct asset management needs assessment. Look at your capacity. Look at your resourcing. Do you have enough resourcing to undertake asset management holistically? And also preparing for those 2025 OREG requirements. And this is a big one. This is one that you should not hesitate to get started on. It will take almost a year to define those target levels of service. When you look at the magnitude of what is expected here, you need to consult with council, you need to consult with internal staff, but you also need to consult and communicate with the public so they understand what this all really means. And then continue improvement on a regular basis. And I hope I brought that in on time without going over. And I'll pass it over to everyone for questions, and thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And so we're going to open the floor to questions for Chris. Let's keep it to questions because the report will be coming on right after. Any questions for Chris? Seeing none, Chris, I guess you were very clear in your presentation. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thanks everyone for having me. Have a good night.
Okay, so up next we have DF 13-2023. In accordance with our procedural bylaw, council will consider an item immediately following a delegation or presentation on it. So DF 13-2023 Asset Management Plan for Non-Core Assets. Can I get a mover and seconder before I get our, I have a mover, Councillor DeRose, and a seconder, Councillor O'Hare. And I'll turn it over to Maria Morrow, Director of Finance, to introduce this. Go ahead, Maria.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendations are that the asset management plan for non-core assets be approved and that staff be directed to incorporate the recommendations into the city's asset management and budget planning. And this concludes the report.
Thank you. And now I'll open the floor for questions. So, are there questions for, go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to the Director of Finance, there's quite a bit of information there to unwrap. But one thing that stuck out was a 1.2% requirement every year annually for an increase in our budget. Is that what we're to take from this?
To you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct. This is just for the non-core assets. We previously did deal with the shortfall for the core assets, and I think that was about 1.6%. So combined shortfall, you're looking in the range of 3%. This then gets escalated as for inflation, along with if we assume any new assets or build any new assets.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for our director? Okay, seeing none, I had a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Delegations. Report DS 39-2023 respecting combined official plan zoning bylaw amendments and modification to draft plan approval for Rolling Meadows Phase 17 to 21 plus block 1239 agenda item 12.6. And up first, the delegation, I'll call on David Falletta, partner of Boostfields Incorporated, for a delegation respecting report DS 39-2023. And I'll let David know that you have 10 minutes, and I'll turn it over to you. I can't hear you, but can you try your volume now? David, can you hear me? We can't hear you.
Sorry, David, it looks like you disconnected from audio.
Is this mic?
The audio just went down.
Sorry, David, I'm just going to send you back to attendee and bring you back in very quickly and see if that brings your microphone on.
their second person's withdrawn, so it's,
There's three on the same delegation.
yeah, is it, are we trying it again first?
Yeah, he's logged back in, so if you want to move down to the third one.
Okay, we're gonna move on and then come back to him, see if we can get connected. I'm gonna call on William Highcoop, Upper Canada Consultants, for a delegation respecting DS 39 2023. And, wait, one sec.
You're back in, David. If you can unmute yourself, great. If not, we'll ask you to disconnect, come back in, and we'll try again.
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear now. I apologize. Usually this happens in the morning, so it's happening now.
Okay, so David, I'm gonna go back to you, and William will go back to you after David's done. So David, you're up, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, members of council, staff, and the public. My name is David Folletta, and I'm a registered professional planner with Bellsfields. And we're the planning consultant to, I believe, a number of landowners around the subject site. I'm here speaking to you regarding phases 17 to 21 of the Rolling Meadows Draft Plan of Subdivision, Red Line Revision. And you will have a letter from Evan Sugden of our office outlining our concerns. And I'm just here to kind of reiterate those concerns and answer any potential questions you might have. So the first thing I'm going to do is outline our concerns related to public consultation and the recommendations before you today. The second thing I'm going to do is outline our concerns related to the application. And then the last thing that we'll do is I'll end with what our recommendations to council are. So again, I'll be very brief in terms of our public consultation concerns. As you may or may not be aware, we outlined this in our letter to you. We filed a pre-consultation application back in June of 2021. That's to start the draft plan of subdivision process for our lands, which are immediately east of the Rolling Meadows lands. And through that process, staff provided us with the previous approval for the Rolling Meadows lands, and we've continued to work with staff to advance those applications, and we've been trying to resolve some of our issues as we move those applications forward, but we were never consulted or made aware of the red line revision that's before you this evening. And that's extremely frustrating for the ownership group as well as our team, because we're trying to align our road pattern with the Rolling Meadows lands, as well as, making sure that things are graded properly and that services are connected properly. So again, we're very concerned, and more specifically, we're extremely concerned with the staff report, which is before you this evening, and recommendation number 3, which specifically states that the application should be deemed to be a minor change and that no further written notice is required. In our opinion, given the implications to the surrounding lands, we think that in fairness and in collaboration, we should continue to consult with the surrounding landowners, and all of the surrounding landowners should be notified. So those are generally our comments with respect to public consultation. As it relates to the concerns with the application, attached to our to our letter, is we've basically taken our draft plan and we've illustrated where it's located as it relates to the subject application. Am I able to share a screen? If not, I could sort of just describe it to you.
You should have the ability to share.
Yeah. The biggest change is Discovery Drive. In the previous approvals that this council approved for Rolling Meadows. Discovery Drive was to continue east and connect to Thorold Town Line Road. And what this application is proposing to do is to remove that connection and instead bring it lower below the hydro corridor. And this is concerning to us for a number of reasons. First of all, from a general traffic flow and road pattern connection, where the change is proposed on Red Haven Drive, that's a local road that doesn't connect back to Barker Parkway. And that's an extremely important connection because, in our opinion, Discovery Drive and Barker Parkway are very important streets in the Rolling Meadows secondary plan area. And the schedule attached to the secondary plan provides for a local road or a road connection to Thorold Town Line Road. So in our opinion, we think the removal of the connection lower down at Red Haven and moving it up to Discovery Drive is extremely important, and we would urge you to make that change and to basically not approve that change. The final thing I will add is that we're extremely supportive of the southern portion of the plan, which has Horizon Heights connecting to the east to our lands. We would like that connection. We think it's important. But we're also concerned with Grimson Avenue. And our understanding, based on discussions with the applicant's planner, is that Grimson Avenue connection to Highway 20 was removed at the request of MTO. And, given that this is a red line revision, they do have an opportunity to re-comment. But in our opinion, the more connections to Highway 20, it's very important because in our opinion, there will be extreme restrictions on each of those blocks to have individual driveway connections to Highway 20. So if there is no road that'll get you to Highway 20, then in our opinion, all of those higher density blocks or highway commercial blocks will be very difficult to redevelop and be difficult to develop for the intended purpose. As you can imagine, any higher density use or any commercial use needs not only visibility to Highway 20, but connectivity. So removing that connection, in our opinion, will create a significant issue, not only for the Rolling Meadows subdivision, which is before you today, but also our lands to the east. And that connectivity, in our opinion, continues to be extremely important. So as I mentioned, I'm going to finish now with my third bucket of information, and that's our recommendation. We're not here to create an obstacle for this application. Instead, we want to work together with this council as well as the applicant to make sure that the best outcome is being resolved. And as such, our recommendation to you is that you not approve the application before you this evening, including staff's recommendation, and instead you require that the applicant continue to work with the surrounding landowners to address our concerns. And I know that in reading the other correspondence from another partner, Emma West, from our office, there are other concerns related to the lands to the west of this application. So in the spirit of collaboration and orderly development of not only this site, but the surrounding lands, that's my submission to you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point.
Thank you, David, and I'll open the floor from council for any questions to the presenter. Go ahead, Councillor O'Hare.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Falletta, thank you for coming before council today. I just wanted to ask you, have you reached out or tried to reach out at all to the applicant? Has there been any discussions directly with the applicant?
Through your worship to the councillor, we had a meeting with the applicant about 2.5 weeks ago, and we've identified the same concerns that we raised with you today. Our understanding was that this application was not being brought forward so quickly. We were only made aware of it late last week, and we pulled together a letter and this submission today. So we're extremely concerned that neither the applicant nor staff advised us of tonight's meeting. So we've been trying to collaborate, and unfortunately we haven't been successful.
Is there any further questions for the presenter? Go ahead, Councillor DeAngelo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just looking at the report here. When did it come in front of council? We had a public meeting regarding this. And my question to the presenter is, were you aware of the public meeting that came before us?
Through you, your worship, to the councillor, again, we weren't made aware of that public meeting either. And we're just trying to catch up on this application. We've been working with the very old plan, as we mentioned. There's been a lot of things happening around this application. We know that there's the quarry lands and the quarry applications to the east that we're also dealing with. So there's been a lot of moving parts, but there's been a real lack of communication with our team and public notice specifically.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, David, for your presentation. The second presentation from David Milano has been withdrawn. However, the letter submitted by the delegates was included in the agenda. Up third, we have William Highcomb of Upper Canada Consultants. I'll call on William for delegation respecting report DS 39 2023, and you have 10 minutes, William.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. Thanks for having you. As indicated, my name is William Highcoop. I'm a planner with Upper Canada Consultants, and I'm here this evening representing my client, Rolling Meadows Land Corporation, with respect to the staff report before you this evening, DS 39 2023. The applications in front of you this evening have been subject to a long extended process. Applications were originally submitted to the city in May of 2022. Applications went through discussions with staff and included a revision to the Village Core Commercial and a revision based on the MTO comments in late 2022. As indicated, a public meeting was held in February 2023 and notice was given in accordance with the Planning Act requirements. Fast forward to now, we are in July of 2023. It's safe to say that this process, this plan, has been out there for quite some time, and we've been working very hard to see it to fruition. Over the course of this process, the owner and the consulting team have worked with staff to ensure that the applications in front of you this evening meet all applicable requirements of the province and its agencies, including Hydro One and TransCanada, all the requirements of the Niagara region, and the requirements of the various city departments and their correlating policies. Conditions of draft approval are already in place to ensure my client adheres to all city and agency requirements as it relates to various aspects, not limited, but including the stormwater management facilities, the existing hydro corridor in consultation with Hydro One, and the proposed road fabric and lotting fabric. My client maintains the position provided in the response letter that I submitted last month. The proposed details that have been submitted with this application have been reviewed by city staff, and it is evident from the recommendation report that they are supportive of the application. We respectfully request that you move forward with staff recommendation for approval this evening. If you have any questions to ask, I'm happy to answer and provide further information. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, William, and I'll open up the floor for questions for William. Are there any questions at this time? Seeing none, William, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And I'm going to move on now to the report, which is DS 39 2023, Combined Official Plan Zoning Bylaw Amendments and Modifications to Draft Plan Approval for Rolling Meadows, Phase 17 to 21, plus Block 1239. Before I ask city staff to present that, can I get a mover and a seconder for the report? I got Councillor Sentence and a seconder, Councillor DeRose. And again, I'll turn this over to Jason Simpson to present this report. Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Please bear with me. As you can see, there's a number of recommendations with this report. Recommendations are that the modifications to the draft plan of subdivision attached as Appendix A to the report be approved. That as per Section 5147 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, as amended, the modifications to the draft plan dated August 23rd, 2022 are deemed to be minor changes and that further written notice is not required. That the mayor or designate be authorized to sign the modified draft plan dated August 23rd, 2022. That the official plan amendment to change the designation of Block 1239 from Rolling Meadows Residential to Rolling Meadows Village Square Commercial in accordance with Appendix B of the report be approved. That the zoning bylaw amendment to zoning bylaw number 214097 to zone the land site-specific residential first D, R1D-10 zone, and site-specific Rolling Meadows residential third density RM R3-10 zone in accordance with Appendix C of the report be approved. That the zoning bylaw amendment to zoning bylaw number 60/2019 to zone the land site-specific residential R1D, R1D-89 with a holding H zone, site-specific residential R2B holding, R2B-90H zone, site-specific residential R3B holding, R3B-91H zone, site-specific residential R3D holding, R3D-92H zone, open space, parks and recreation, OS1 zone, utility U zone, major institutional holding, I1 zone, and mixed-use commercial C6-93 zone in accordance with Appendix C of the report be approved. And lastly, that the amendment to bylaw 60-2019 be passed at the same time as the amendment to bylaw 214097. And that concludes the recommendations of this report.
Thank you, Jason. And now I'll open the floor up for questions to staff regarding this report. Are there any questions? Go ahead, Councillor D'Angelo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't seem to get my map back on here, but if staff can put the map of the red line, that's red line revisions. Just had a couple questions, but it's easier if the map is on the big screen.
I'll wait till they are on. Is he on?
Yeah, the question I had related to, the map that I had was pretty good up here, but that one's a little bit more detailed. The other one just highlighted, the question related to one of the proponents asking about extending, was it Red Haven to Highway 20? And just, if I could get a little clarity on that, I would think less entrances. I know the MTO didn't want that. I'm sure it's more of a traffic issue and there's a roundabout there. And maybe you could explain a little bit why that roundabout's there and that's supposed to deal with all the internal traffic coming out as opposed to an additional road? Like, would there be another, is the expectation is to have another roundabout there to filter some of that traffic? Or is that roundabout that's there capable of dealing with the flow and bringing it out onto Highway 20? Just a little clarity on that.
Yep, and Sean Dunsmore, our manager engineering's there to answer that.
It's pretty much as you said. It's the roundabout at Barker Parkway that's installed is there to carry the traffic from most of the secondary plan area. We originally had the other road connecting back in the original draft approval. The MTO, when we installed that roundabout, has made it so that there's a restriction on any new accesses to Highway 20. So the intent is to eliminate all of them from there on out.
Okay, so the request then isn't a really good request to add another exit there because of the MTO and what's been done in this current situation.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, that answers my question. I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none, we had a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Is he on Zoom? Okay, so up next we have delegations, motion respecting food security, and I'll call on Stephen Zeus for delegation respecting Councillor DeRosa's food security motion. Is Stephen here? Is he online? He's not online. I don't see him here. Well,
No, I don't see him, Mr. Mayor, so
we can just move ahead with the motion, though.
if you'd like to, yes.
Yes, I'd like to just keep the flow going like we have it, so. Food security, I'll call on Councillor DeRose for his motion on food security, and I'll ask for a seconder. Is there a seconder for Councillor's motion? I have Councillor Sentence, so. Mover, Councillor DeRose, seconder, Councillor Sentence, and I'll turn the floor over to Councillor DeRose.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Be it resolved that, through you, Mr. Mayor, be it resolved that the Council of the City of Thorold enacts as follows, that the Council of the City of Thorold endorses community-supported agriculture led by local community organizations as a way to help address the lack of nutritional food available to the community. That the mayor be directed to write a letter to the Provincial Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, and the Federal Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food to petition them to increase purchasing power around access to nutritional food. To improve the identification of local products in existing supply chains, encourage the development of new markets for local food, re-explore labeling of foods that are genetically modified in the interest of consumers' choice, and work with all local Niagara governments and community organizations to provide more assistance to Niagara residents who are not food secure. That this resolution be circulated to all Niagara area municipalities, Niagara's local member of parliament, provincial parliament, Niagara's local members of parliament, the provincial minister of agriculture, food and rural affairs, the federal minister of agriculture and agri-foods, Niagara Christian Gleaners, Small Scale Farms United Way, Food Security Network, federal minister of agriculture and agri-food, Feed Ontario, Hope Centre Welland, Rural Ontario Municipal Association, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Community Care of St. Catharines and Thorold, Community Care of West Niagara, Ontario Federation of Agriculture, Food and Beverage Ontario, and the Ontario Agribusiness Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeRose. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this notice of motion? Go ahead, Councillor DeRose.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. It's evident, I think everybody in this room visually sees what's going on with the price of food rising so fast, inflation on food surpassing more than 4 times what the annual inflation rate should be. People are struggling, and so this, I know this is, sounds like a lot, but it's a little, I think it's the least we can do to try to play our part in helping people. I see it at school every day. Thank you to the anonymous donor that donated food for our food program, but you wouldn't believe how much food we go through at school with kids that don't have breakfast and don't have proper nourishment before they start learning. So I hope my fellow councillors endorse this motion, and I think it's for the good of our community and the Niagara region. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeRose. Any further comments on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay. Delegation 10.3, report PWCS 59-2023 respecting Port Robinson East traffic calming, agenda item 12.4. And I'll call on Ron Devereaux for a delegation respecting report PWCS 59-2023 and remind him that he is to provide new information respecting this matter as he has delegated in the past, and he has up to 10 minutes for his delegation. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you, Mayor Ugolini. You know I always have new information. Thank you for the opportunity to advocate on behalf of the residents of Port Robinson East. And before the clerk puts me on the 10-minute clock, I have an administrative request which I have sent to both the clerk and to the mayor. Unfortunately, I had internet problems this afternoon. My internet was down for a long time and then intermittent after that. But I would like to request 1 minute for the mayor, all councilors, the CAO, the city clerk, and all operations staff to check your email inboxes now for a Word document from me late this afternoon. Unfortunately, it was at 5:40 p.m. of the comments I'm going to make tonight. But I did send it basically so you could follow along to what I'm going to say. And subsequently, having that document, it makes it easy for the clerk to attach my comments to the minutes of this meeting.
And everybody received that email? I know I did. Go ahead, Councillor Duron.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm having some internet issues. Is there any way we can put it up on the screen?
I'll ask the clerk if that's possible.
I did have a request to the city clerk for, I have 2 photographs, 2 slides that I would like on the screen when I ask for them at the appropriate time.
Okay, we will do that. We will provide those at the appropriate time in the presentation. You tell us when and the clerk will put them up, okay?
Great.
So you can start.
Okay, introduction. My comments tonight are based on my observations as a resident of Port Robinson East for 37 plus years. They are factual, constructive criticisms based on common sense, logical, rational, objective, critical thinking. There were about 35 people at the first Public Information Center meeting and 18 at the second one. I attended both PICs for the full 2 hours each. Related to the PICs, I have sent to the engineering staff in writing 3 Word documents totaling 33 pages of very detailed traffic calming comments. But some of my most crucial details have not been crafted into this report to ensure that it's a comprehensive, cohesive, and complete traffic calming plan. Please remember that phrase, comprehensive, cohesive, complete plan. Focus and context number 1. The geography of the Welland Canal and Chippewa Creek create and dictate very limited road access into and out of Port Robinson East. All of Cambie Street and all of South Street North form the only tractor-trailer truck access route servicing the industrial area at the north end of South Street North. For the commuters, 60-ton tractor-trailers, 20-ton dump trucks, and all the other commercial vehicles of every size and shape. South Street North is a narrow dead-end street, so all the industrial traffic that comes into this residential area has to exit back out the same way via South Street and then via the full length of Cambie Street. This automatically doubles the amount of the heavy industrial traffic on the entire length of these 2 residential streets every day. Slide 1, please. Many of these industrial and commercial vehicles are driven as if this route is a superhighway, not a quaint residential area. Many of the commuters to and from the industries drive the same way. This has to be stopped. Focus and context number 2, a major overall weakness of the city's proposed traffic calming plan is that it only includes 20% of Cambie Street and not 100% of it. I specifically asked city staff to have another PIC that included all of Cambie Street, but that hasn't happened. So quite frankly, I'm actually shocked that this traffic calming plan is before council tonight. Without including all of Cambie Street, all the way out to the Allenport Road intersection, this proposed traffic calming plan is incomplete and therefore is seriously flawed. Eastbound vehicles on Cambie Street are traveling past NTEC at up to 80 kilometers per hour, sometimes more, literally at all hours of the day and night. 3 examples of proof of speeding problems on all of Cambie Street are the slow down please signs that some residents have posted on their lawns. Number 2, quoting from an email sent by a Port Robinson resident to the mayor and all councillors in February of 2023. Vehicles of all descriptions fly through our village at excessive rates of speed with little fear of repercussion. Last night while walking my dog, an ATV came screaming along River Street and Cambie Street doing at least 80 kilometers per hour. Number 3, a different person posted this comment on the Port Robinson Proud Facebook page. This traffic calming on Cambie shouldn't stop at the CN Railroad tracks. It should go all the way to Allenport Road. While walking my dog, the number of times I've seen idiots doing 70 to 80 kilometers per hour is ridiculous, end quote. Council action is required. A primary goal tonight is to ask council to ensure that the traffic calming plan is comprehensive, cohesive, and fully complete by directing city staff to revise it to include the 80% of Cambie Street that's been left out. Focus and context number 3. I do agree with recommendations 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the report. Recommendation number 5 is vague and incomplete, precisely because the 2 PIC meetings did not address all of Cambie Street, only a portion of it, as I just mentioned. Because Port Robinson East is a well-defined small geographic enclave, then within the whole village, it's not reasonable to have varying speed limits. So recommendation number 5 should be worded according to what I submitted to city staff in writing. Quote, the speed limit in all of Port Robinson East on all streets, main streets and side streets, needs to be reduced to 40 kilometers per hour as an attempt to address the Wild West driving, speeding, etc. issues by all vehicles, ATVs, dirt bikes, motorcycles, cars, pickup trucks, industrial trucks, and commercial delivery trucks, etc. At the same time, the whole village needs to be designated with signage as a community safety zone where fines are automatically doubled, end quote. Focus and context number 4. I'm skipping to report recommendation number 7, and then I will backtrack to recommendation number 6. Overall, I'm in favor of the proposed safety warning signage approaching the Port Robinson Park entrance in both directions. I'm 100% in favor of the pedestrian crosswalk being approved in the 2024 budget across Cambie Street to the entrance of Port Robinson Park as illustrated in the plan. After the May 24th PIC meeting, I sent a follow-up email to the engineering staff on May 26 as follows, which has not been included anywhere in the correspondence appendix number 3 of the report. Quote, a flashing light hanging at the intersection of Cambie Street and South Street North was recommended by several residents, flashing yellow to Cambie River Street traffic and flashing red to South Street North. For the record, I'm 100% in favor of that, end quote. At that strategic and busy intersection, it's a very necessary component of a comprehensive, cohesive, complete plan. Slide number 2, please. Facing westbound traffic on Cambie Street curve at the park entrance, the proposed curve sign illustrated in the plan is poorly located and inadequate to define and warn of the curve. Attached to the guardrail at the park entrance should be several yellow rectangular reflective warning signs with black arrows called chevrons pointing to the left. There we go. Focus and context number 5. Backtracking to report recommendation number 6. For the entire 37 years that I have lived in Port Robinson East, a regular visible Niagara Regional Police presence and police radar enforcement of the Cambie Street, River Street corridor and on South Street North has been non-existent. Back to slide number 1, please. So the pattern of 37 plus years of bad driving behavior passing through Port Robinson East is not going to be corrected overnight. For a comprehensive, cohesive, complete plan, more 40-kilometer speed limit signs than normal will be needed in both directions, on all of Cambie Street, all of South Street North, and all of River Street. Human nature is such that generally traffic signs alone have limited effectiveness unless there is regular police visibility in Port Robinson East, achieved by regular police radar enforcement of the laws, issuing traffic tickets. As part of this new comprehensive, cohesive, complete traffic calming plan, the City of Thorold needs to be far more emphatic, persistent, and forcefully involved on this issue with the Niagara Regional Police. It is reasonable to assume that the mayor and the CAO could be in charge or will be in charge of that. How much time do I have left,
A
Mr.
minute
Clerk?
and a half.
Pardon?
A minute and a half.
Thank you very much. Focus number 6. Focus and context number 6. I'm at 100% in favor of the use of portable flashing speed limit signs. Special note number 1, the 3 flashing signs requested need to be assigned to Port Robinson East every year from April 1st to November 30th. Special note number 2, I will gladly meet with city staff to suggest the starter locations where they can be placed first, and then other locations where they can move around on a rotating basis in Port Robinson East. Anytime you want to meet with me on site in Port Robinson East on any subject, just give me 24 hours notice of the time you want to meet. The rest of the presentation from number 7 on, I won't have time to read, so I did. Pardon? I did include it so that at least it is here for the record. So I'll just return to my request for council action is required. A primary goal tonight is to ask council to ensure that the traffic calming plan is comprehensive, cohesive, and fully complete by directing city staff to revise it to include the 80% of Cambie Street that's been left out. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ron, and now I'll open the floor up for any questions to Mr. Devereaux. Go ahead, Councillor Doros.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks, Ron. Ron, has staff ever given you a reason why only 20% of the road was addressed?
No.
Have you asked?
Because I attended the 2 the PICs, I went over the fact that basically what I've said here and what I've written is that without it, it's not complete. No, I didn't really get an answer. The emphasis seemed to be that the section of Cambie Street, section of Cambie Street approaching the park entrance and turning onto South Street was very important, which is absolutely correct. But you can't take 20% of a you can't take 80% of a tractor trailer industrial truck route and leave it out of this traffic calming plan, and that's basically what's been done.
Thank you, Ron. I'll have some questions for staff later.
Thank you. Any further questions for Ron? Seeing none, I want to thank you, Ron, for your presentation, and thank you for coming to council and for your wholesome report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And now I'll put the report on the floor, which is PWCS 2023, Port Robinson East traffic calming. Can I get a mover and a seconder? I got Councillor D'Angela and Councillor DeRose. And now I'll turn this over to report DS 39 2023, and I'll ask Jeff Holman, our Director of Public Works and Community Services, to bring this report forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation is that One, that an all-way stop be installed at the intersection of Bridge Street East and River Street. Two, that an all-way stop be installed at the intersection of River Street and Bigger Road. Three, that the traffic parking bylaw number 150/2012 be amended to recognize the installation of an all-way stop at the intersection of Bridge Street East and River Street. Four, that the traffic and parking bylaw number 150/2012 be amended to recognize the installation of an all-way stop at the intersection of River Street and Bigger Road. Five, that the traffic and parking bylaw number 150/2012 be amended to reduce the posted speed limit from 50 kilometers per hour to 40 kilometers per hour along Canby Street, River Street, and South Street North. Six, that line painting and additional signage be installed along Canby Street, River Street, and South Street North. And seven, that a pedestrian crossover on Canby Street adjacent to Port Robinson Park be considered as part of the 2024 budget. Thank you.
Thank you. And before I put questions, Ron, you can sit down, please. Now. Okay, now I'll open the floor for questions to staff. Go ahead, Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, a lot of insightful remedies to this. I just want to reiterate Ron's concern why only a fraction of the road was looked at, or to Sean, one of you. Is that correct? I'm just.
I'll either one.
Why only
Jeff
part of?
or
Why was
Sean?
only part of the road then? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is related to our traffic calming policy. We request petitions to move forward on traffic calming from people in that front on the area of concern. We have not received a petition for anything to the east of the railroad tracks, but we could certainly, at council's discretion, move forward with that.
And more than likely, if the speeding's occurring in that spot, it's.
For sure.
I understand. So that's the protocol. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Councillor Sentence, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. So I like these recommendations. I don't want to lose attraction. I'm going to vote for this today. But in my opinion, how do we go ahead and include that other 80%? Is it through a notice of motion, or is it just, can we ask you to take a look at that as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it could be an amendment to this motion to direct staff to look at another portion of the road for these same issues. So it could be an amendment to this motion, so it's all part and parcel to it. That would allow you to pass what's already on the floor.
This would go through. Okay, could I go ahead and ask for that?
You can.
Or they should follow the traffic calming policy. Yeah, the policy. Policy suggests that it has to be directed by the residents of the area.
No, wait, is that direction okay? I'll ask Sean to do that, or would you?
Yeah, to study Canby between the railroad tracks and Allenport Road?
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
we would certainly.
Okay, so that's what your amendment is. Okay, can I get a seconder for the amendment? I got Councillor D'Angelo. We'll deal with the amendment first, okay? Because the amendment's on the floor. To add an amendment to this to include that area and for a study from staff, okay? Does anyone want to speak just to the amendment? Go ahead, do you want to speak to that amendment?
Just a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the timing of that. How long will it take, and what will, timing wise?
Good question. Sean, can you answer that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have public information centers on these things, so it takes us a few weeks to turn around a design, and then public information, we let people comment, so probably before Christmas we could have something back to council.
Okay, so on the amendment, okay, is there any further discussion on the amendment? You want to read that amendment, and then we'll vote on the amendment, and then we'll go back to the whole.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, we just get the portion of road for the wording for the amendment. Is it to a specific intersection or between intersections?
I believe the request is from the
Allenport Road to the tracks, am I correct?
Allenport Road to, call it South Street North.
Track crossing. Okay. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, that is carried. Okay, now we're back to the whole report. So that, Councillor DeAngelo, did you have questions regarding that? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
through you, Mr. Mayor, just if we have an update on the electronic signs that we talked about at budget time, where they are, or when do we anticipate getting them? And can this be utilized as one of the areas for our test data?
Sean, do you have an answer to that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have an answer about, could we use that area? Yes, absolutely. The status of the signs, give me a sec. They're ready to go.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's excellent, because last time we talked that these signs do provide data, and especially if we're looking at the other portion of the road to get some actually true data of what speeding's happening, it would be really good. And then I also have another amendment I'd like to put on here after fellow councillors have spoken.
Okay, is there any further questions regarding the recommendations? I don't see any, so you can go ahead and put your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know when we try some of these programs, traffic calming, I'd like to see us put another recommendation in there that after a year, we review these traffic calming measures to see how they worked, what's going well, what's not going well, what needs to be revised. And given the timeline of getting the potentially secondary additional, maybe we could set that at the end of next summer, is to have staff come back with potentially, well, I would have another public meeting maybe towards the end of next summer to see how these traffic calming measures are actually working out and how it's going. Because to do it is great, but I'd like to see what the results are. Are they actually achieving what we're trying to do, and can we tweak them to make sure that they are achieving what we're trying to do? So I'm looking for an amendment that we review this in a year and a half so that we know exactly how it works.
So the amendment is to review these traffic calming measures within a year and a half, because we know that there's still improvement to come. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Longo. Okay, speakers to that. Okay, go ahead, Councillor DeRose.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, I'll support Councillor DeAngelo. The one thing, and just happened recently near my house, another car went off the bottom of the hill near the oldest schoolhouse in Canada. And I spoke to the police officer, and he recognizes, I talked to Paul Webb, who's on the Road Safety Committee with Henry, Councillor DeAngelo and I, and the one thing that we need, we do need more police presence. So is there any way to add that to the amendment, or is that something totally separate?
That's something different we can deal with as far as policing issues. Right now, we want to deal with
yeah,
this
take care of that, because I'm going to
calming.
bring that up down the road, even if we have to hire someone. I don't know.
Okay, so that is, second amendment's been put on, that these traffic calming measures be reviewed. I think that's what,
I'm good with that.
You're good with
It's given
what?
some flexibility, just in case
okay.
timing of the additional measures that might
1
be
year
implemented.
after implementation, okay, and I had a seconder, Councillor Longo. All those in favor? Opposed, that is carried. Okay, so now we have the whole thing with the two amendments as a whole now. And I had a mover and a seconder. Who was the mover and a seconder on that? Do you have that? Okay, and we had a mover and a seconder, Councillor DeAngelo and Councillor DeRose. All those in favor? Opposed, that is carried. Thank you. Okay. Now we move on to statutory public meeting under the Planning Act. Okay, so I'll call to order the public meeting being held pursuant to the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act as amended, respecting the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for 3401 Schmoen Parkway. Up first is the applicant presentation, and I'll call on David Godden for the applicant presentation, and remind them that you have 10 minutes for your presentation. And David, the floor is yours. And this is regarding 3401 Schmoen Parkway.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, councillors, staff, and members of the public who are attending tonight. My name is David Godin. I'm a planner with Urban Strategies based out of our Hamilton office, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight. With me as well are Scott Johnson, who is the head of the infrastructure and operations at Brock University, this gentleman to my left, and also Roland Meck, who is the associate director of space planning for Brock University as well. Now, I have a presentation that's been conveyed. What is the best way to go about requesting that to come up and to have slides advanced?
The clerk will be handling that.
Perfect.
Or is it?
Yeah, it'll be up in a moment.
Certainly.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So this is in regards to 3401 Schmoen Parkway. This is a site-specific official plan amendment, an OPA, and a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment, ZBA. May I have the next slide, please? The purpose of which is very straightforward. It's to permit non-residential post-secondary institutional uses at 3401 Schmoen Parkway in the Brock Business Park. May I have the next slide, please? These come fast and furious. So for context, this is very close by us. This is the Enbridge building that's just down the street beside the Parkway Lofts, just beside as well the CAA headquarters. And this is a 3.3 hectare site. It contains an existing two-story building, which is approximately 8,000 square meters, about 86,500 square feet. The Enbridge build has been using as a facility for offices and industrial works. The location's relevance in particular to Brock University is that we are just south of the campus, as you're well aware, as well as from where we are currently in the city of Thorold and the Niagara region and all the surrounding development to the southwest and east. May I have the next slide, please? So the rationale, what brought us to this point is that the introduction of the Department of Engineering at Brock University, which is fantastic, is also creating a near-term space shortage. This is quite acute. There will be a longer-term plan, I'm certain, to be able to address that on campus itself. But this is a pragmatic and actually very cost-effective near-term solution to be able to add additional campus space that can be renovated internally to be able to meet university needs, and be able to have students accommodated close to the campus in very short order. The reason that this is needed is that the official plan and also the zoning bylaw for this site don't currently allow post-secondary use of the site. The proposed site-specific official plan amendment would add non-residential institutional use, post-secondary use, and change nothing else. The site-specific zoning bylaw amendment would add non-residential post-secondary institution as a use and change nothing else. And we'll get into a bit more detail of those later, but that's the context and the framing, and we'll tell you a little bit more about the building or the use of it. If I may have the next slide, please. So the proposed uses of this building are actually very similar to what it already does now. It's office, it's laboratory or space of that sort. There'd also be some seminar rooms, ultimately some classrooms, student collaborative space, and a data center for the campus. The users would be the Department of Engineering and Brock administration, and the head count, and of course this is subject to fine tuning, but as Roland and his colleagues have been able to surmise at this state, it'd be approximately 150 students, both undergraduate and graduate, 15 faculty, and 20 to 30 staff for the fall 2024-25 academic year. That would increase to about 230 students, an increase of faculty and staff, bringing in overall head count that's starting to get close to 300, which is a substantial number on this site. May I have the next slide, please? So for the official plan amendment component, this is in the Brock Business Park and the Brock Business Park secondary plan. It is employment lands, and under the designation for this site, a quite wide range of uses are permitted. However, there is language in the official plan that specifically prohibits new institutional uses on the site. and except with some exceptions for those ancillary to a proposed or existing use, but that it wouldn't apply to a university use of the site. The proposed official plan amendment, as I initially said, would just simply add non-residential institutional use, major institutional use, as a permitted use for this site alone in the Brock Business Park employment official plan designation. May I have the next slide, please? As the Niagara region is a two-tier municipality under the Planning Act and the Ontario planning system, the regional official plan has relevance to this matter. Now, under the regional official plan, the site has the designation Knowledge and Innovation Employment Area, and in the regional official plan, post-secondary uses are permitted. It's called out specifically as one of the uses that are envisioned for this type of land use. So the introduction through this requested official plan amendment to add non-residential post-secondary use is consistent with the regional official plan. May I have the next slide, please? So for the zoning piece of the equation, under the existing M1 prestige employment zoning, the site has a wide range of uses which are permitted. In fact, almost precisely the uses that are being proposed by the university's use of the site, but it does not have post-secondary use as a permission. So the proposed site-specific zoning bylaw amendment would maintain all the existing rules and regulations of the M1 prestige employment zone, and for this site specifically, it would permit non-residential post-secondary institution as a permitted use. Next slide, please. So these are just a couple extracts of the actual policy tools, the implementing documents, and I'll just share them to reassure that this is a site-specific official plan amendment that's being proposed. It is just for the parcels that make up 3401 Shimon Parkway, and the policies that are applying would all continue with the addition of non-residential institutional use as a permitted use on the site. May I have the next slide, please? Similarly, for the official plan, as the official plan amendment, the zoning bylaw amendment is specific just to the site, and it would maintain and carry forward all of the M1 prestige industrial zoning requirements and guidelines and rules, and it would simply add for this site non-residential post-secondary institution as a permitted use. And next slide, please, which just confirms that all else would be considered. So with respect to comments, there has been circulation of the application, which is a planning justification report, and there have not been comments received that are raising concerns. Of course, there's still engineering is reviewing, and commenting parties have the right to revise their comments, but at this time, no concerns have been raised. And Your Worship and Councillors, at this point, that is what I came to share, and I'd be happy to take questions, address any concerns, and if my colleagues from Brock can further address matters, they'd be happy to as well.
Thank you, David. I'm going to open the floor now for any questions for David. Are there questions? Go ahead, Councillor Thorold.
Through Mr. Mayor, thanks, David. David, how soon will learning occur? Will it be 2024?
The intention is to be able to have that coincide with the beginning of the engineering program's intake. So if I am correct, that is correct. It would be fall 2024, so the 2024-2025 academic year. The adaptive reuse of building is key to be able to have this occur quite quickly.
I think this will be a great boon to Thorold. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeRose. Go ahead, Councillor DeAngelo. Do you have your hand up, regard?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple questions. One is the list of comments up there. You had Electra, the utility, made no comment because they're not in the jurisdiction here. Did you check with Hydro One?
I would have to defer to staff for the circulation.
Okay.
Those were the comments that were received.
That were received, okay. And then the secondary question is, I don't know if you can answer this. Once it gets rezoned and it's used as an institutional for Brock University, will they be paying payment in lieu of taxes, or will the property maintain a tax base?
That's an excellent question. I think I'd have to defer to my colleagues from Brock.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this will actually change the history of Brock University and its lands, which currently are split between the city of Thorold and the city of St. Catharines, and in lieu of taxes, the heads and beds tax that we currently pay to the city of St. Catharines, once there is students in Thorold, then theoretically, and I'm not the CFO, so I can't speak for the CFO, but theoretically, you now do a split of percentage of students between the two cities.
Okay, to me, that's a big concern, because right now we're getting zero, and we have some costs associated with the students in our community. So as this progresses, I think that's very, very important that it's brought to the forefront prior to the zoning amendment. It'll make my decision a lot easier if we're getting compensation, because that's an industrial piece of property, and if we lose all the taxes there, we're going to lose a lot. So as Councillor DeRose mentioned, it may not be a windfall for Thorold. It may actually be a big hole for us. So very critical on how that progresses as we go through this process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Go ahead, Councillor O'Hare.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to David, thank you for your presentation. Just a couple of questions. First off, I want to say I also agree with Councillor D'Angelo that if we are involved in the Heads for Beds or portion of Brock's contribution to our own base, that would be wonderful. I'd support that too. My question is, it's quite a parcel of land, lots of area there to develop even further, quite a bit of parking I see, but are there plans at all to perhaps enlarge this site in terms of occupancy for further future student classes?
Go ahead, Scott.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. If I rewind for a second way back to how Brock University was started by the Allenberg Women's Institute, starting in the 1950s, and eventually chose the site we're on here in 1964 and built towards that. The original plan was to have engineering. And so this actually, we're very excited at Brock to be able to be launching engineering in 2024. And with that, we do have a 10-year plan on significantly growing engineering. What I can't answer today is whether we'll grow engineering on that site or on the main campus. If I look way back to the master plan, the first master plan done for the university in 1968, that entire industrial area is shown as Brock Innovation Park, which was to be a higher ed institutional growth area. Specifically to the site, I would say long term there would be plans to grow and build on those facilities. I will kind of dive in your answer a little bit, or your question a little bit, on if we continue to use it as it's zoned today, because Brock owns that site and operates out for the last 13 months, under the current uses, then Brock would not pay any tax, right? That's just under the federal government and the Brock Act and University Acts. It's only when we change it to be able to teach on that, does that other tax base come into play? So.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers the question.
Great, thank you. I fully support the repurposing of the building as well, as opposed to what we often see nowadays where buildings get torn down to just have another building erected in its place. So I'm really pleased to see that. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Sentence.
Yeah, I do like what I see here too. Could I ask Scott? Could I ask you a question? Maybe I misheard this. So this would now put us in the heads and beds category and split it with St. Catharines?
So I can't confirm. My background is engineering, looking
Right.
after infrastructure and operations. I don't have the CFO with me today, but there's been discussions on that, to how that works, but only works when you're teaching on a specific site. And that's been the technicality historically with St. Catharines and Thorold and Brock being 50-50 split almost on those lands, is we don't have any buildings in Thorold. Only all the buildings on our campus, even though it's split 50-50, are all on St. Catharines lands.
Could you ask your CFO to let us know that
Yes.
answer? That's huge.
Well, wait.
Oh, there we go.
Our Director of Finance has
Okay.
been heavily involved in this.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the way the heads and beds taxes work, it's $75 a head. So
based on
depending on the number of students that they have that would be situated in this building, it would be $75 times your capacity for students, and then that gets split between the city and the region.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Go ahead, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm very excited the engineering program's coming to Brock. You guys give a lot of business to Niagara, and I'm really excited you're expanding and growing. It's very important to Niagara. The Brock keeps on growing. It provides so many jobs, and I'm very excited in there. And you got my support 100%.
Thank you, Councillor Devonitis. The one thing that would be good, because the biggest donor to get the engineering program up and running is directly across the street in Norgem Biotech, whose gift to the university for the engineering program of $5 million. And so it would be the perfect place to run the engineering program. Did anyone else have any questions? Okay. Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation. And
Thank you.
I'm going to move on to registered speakers. At this time, is there anyone online or present in the chamber who wishes to speak on this application? Do we have anyone online? At this time, is there anyone online or present in the chamber who wishes to speak to this application? I've been notified there's no one online, am I correct? I'll just read it one more time then. At this time, is there anyone online or present in the chamber who wishes to speak on the application? Seeing none, and the questions have been looked after, I'll move on to the planning report. 1131 DS 43 2023 3401 Schmoen Parkway proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment D0903 2023 and D1406 2023. Report DS 34 2023 is only presented to council and the public for information purposes. It is currently open for questions and/or comment from members of City Council. Please note all comments will be captured by City staff and incorporated into the final report, which will be brought forward to a council meeting, to a future council meeting for considerations. Are there any questions? Do we want to, is there anything to read from staff? No? Okay. Nick's online for any questions. Are there any questions or comments from members of council at this time? Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question kind of goes along with what Councillor D'Angelo said. It would be directed to the Director of Finance. In the report that comes back, if we could get a comprehensive analysis of current taxes that are generated there, property taxes, and what we could anticipate with the Learning Center, or I guess the other alternative is if it's decided to be used only as I guess an administrative building. We kind of need to know that. So if that can be included in the report.
Okay, that's duly noted. Are there any further questions? I need, can I get a mover and a seconder to receive the report? I got Councillor Sentence and Councillor O'Hare. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Adjournment of the public meeting. This fulfills the requirements of the Planning Act pursuant to Section 34. The public meeting portion of these applications is now adjourned. Thank you once again. Okay. Now we move on to items for consent. Is there any councillors who want to lift any consent items 12.1 through 12.4 or 12.7 through 12.9? Please let me know or if we're taking them as a block or we're pulling any. Go ahead, Councillor D'Angelo.
12.1.
12.1, okay. Anyone else? Okay, can I get a mover and seconder to take the rest of the items as a block? Can I get a mover and a seconder? I got Councillor O'Hara and Councillor Didavidas. If I got that right? I'm working on it. Okay, so we're going to take 12.2, 12.3, 12.4, 12.7, 12.8, 12.9. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Now, 12.1, CAO Report 9, 2023, Hybrid Work Policy. Who's going to put that on the floor? Huh? Okay, Ashley, welcome. And Ashley will put the report on the floor, and then Councillor D'Angelo hold it, so then we can open the floor for questions after.
Okay, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
CO Report 9, 2023. Recommendations that Council approve the attached hybrid work policy, that the capital cost of $3,000 be funded from the Municipal Capital Reserve, and that the operating cost of $3,000 be funded from the general budget overrun.
Okay, now I'll open the floor, and I know Councillor D'Angelo, you pulled that, so go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My only comment on that is I see we're putting money aside in the capital for, and it's coming, part of it's coming as a transfer from another area. I don't have the report in front of me, so I have my notes on it. And the other one was a budget overrun. My concern is, and I brought this up, and I think this is my opportunity here. I know it's great if we can offer a little bit of incentive to work from home for staff, but I know management and senior supervisors will be very cognizant of which staff can work from home and which can't. I give that to their understanding. My point is, as a counselor, I'm struggling with the equipment that's been provided for me, and we haven't had an opportunity. In the budget, there was no money for an upgrade of computer. I'm struggling with the iPad I have. It doesn't always work. It doesn't always connect to my meetings, and where's Mr. Dunsmore? He can attest to it. I was on a committee meeting for the city, and it didn't connect, and then he called me, so then I had to start talking over the phone. So this is my opportunity, if we can put a little bit more money in there and upgrade some of the counselors' equipment so they can work from home and do the job that they're supposed to be doing, that would be very beneficial to me. This one's very small, hard to read, and there's no money in the budget, and I was told that I have to bring it up at council. So here's my opportunity. I'm seeing if we can add a little bit more to that capital override so that if a counselor needs to upgrade his equipment, because these are from last term, so they are aged. I was going to bring it up under the capital asset management plan, but I didn't think that was appropriate at the point in time there. So I'm looking for staff to see what funds they need, and I'd like to put an amendment on the floor that's included as part of this report.
And I'll turn it over to Manoj. You want to speak to that?
So, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor D'Angelo, so you are asking for everyone to get equipment or just on an as-required basis?
I would say as required, because if the other councillors are happy with their devices and they're providing the service, I see a couple laptops over there. I'm not sure if they're personal ones or if I see a nodding of the head. So we have councillors here providing their own personal equipment to do a councillor's job. As part of my responsibility, I need equipment from the city to do my job. So this one's not adequate for me. It's not doing the job I need. I've been here almost, it's going to be close to a year soon. But I don't see it as meeting my needs and the way it works. It just doesn't work. If the other councillors' equipment is working for them, they don't need to jump in. I'm not looking for something because I want something. I'm looking for something because I need something. And I'm not servicing my residents as effectively using this piece of equipment. So that's my concern.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, depending on who is interested in getting more laptops, we can process it accordingly. And then if you want to have an amendment to this report itself, and I'm assuming that you assume about $2,500 with the software and the hardware associated with it, I think that's what we use. Or you want staff to bring back a report later on. I'm just trying to find out what are we trying to achieve here.
All I know is I have an issue. I'm not sure if any other councillors are having an issue. So if you have an issue, I would speak up right now so staff understands that. If you don't have an issue, just don't worry about it.
Go ahead, Councillor Lano. And then Councillor
I'll go on the record and say I have an issue because I have my own laptop here because the device I have isn't suitable. So
I'll just go on record as saying I think everybody, councillor, should be getting new equipment. That's something I agree with. Go ahead, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I agree. Tonight I brought my own in because the city one's not cooperating. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Sentence.
Yeah, I agree. They are slow, cumbersome, and they don't work half the time, so I agree with Councillor D'Angelo.
I can tell you at the region, at the beginning of every term, new equipment's issued to councillors, and the old councillors have the option to buy the other equipment if they want to buy it. Go ahead, Councillor Decker.
So obviously we want to make sure that our staff as well have the proper equipment if they're going to be working from home. So is this something that we have to pass a motion to make sure we have better equipment going forward, or is it a budgetary issue?
Manoj, you want to speak because most
Yeah.
staff has the equipment.
Yeah, I think the
provide.
equipment that we are talking about for work from home is some headsets so that they can, so that's the reason if you look at it, there are a number of staff who are going to be working from home. That is, if you can look at it, the amount is very small. The amount of capital is mainly for the headsets, and then also from the operating standpoint that if they are going to make a phone call from home, that's the software that they have to add to their own equipment. We are not buying laptops for the staff. The ones that they have, that's fine, but there are a number of staff who will be working from home, but we are not buying laptops for them. So if you look at the amounts are very minimal, just because of mainly because of the use of phone usage by staff.
So I think that's great that they're going to be able to do that. So I'm good with that. As for the other equipment, perhaps this is, I saw Maria had her hand up, so.
I'll let the Director of Finance speak.
Through
on
Mr. Mayor, you know, if I could make a suggestion, I don't think we should be replacing just some of them. If we're going to replace, we should replace all of them. It makes it easier for IT when they just have one set of devices to look after. That said, I don't know what the overall cost is, so if council can indulge me, we can come back at the next meeting with the cost estimates and proceed at that point.
Okay, go ahead.
So, Mr. Mayor, I guess if we are talking about 9 laptops, and if we allocate $25,000, and if there is additional amount of money that is required, we'll come back to council. But if you want to expedite it, you want to add $25,000 for council equipment, probably that's the way to go about it.
It's going to come back with a number and a report from IT. So, okay, can we pass this hybrid work policy with the amendment that staff come back to the next meeting with the cost of upgrading all councillors' equipment, and we'll deal with it at the next meeting. Is everybody good with that? Then we can pass it as a lump sum, knowing the cost, which will be provided. Okay? Are we good with that?
Yes.
Well, I'm asking Councillor Dean.
Yeah. I'm good with that. I just want, we need these devices to do our job.
Exactly.
It's not a bonus. It's not something. We do everything on eScribe here. If you can't access that, you can't do on emails because we have a city email. That's why I really want to stress this. It's not. It's cost of me trying to do my job most effectively.
And there's meetings that are held by Zoom that are required as well. Okay, go ahead, Councillor DeRose. Did you want to speak?
Yeah,
And then
through
Councillor
you,
Long?
Mr. Mayor. I wanted to get back to the hybrid work policy. I agree with all about the electronics. $3,000 is pittance. I'm not worried about that. I am concerned, I do have a concern where, and I, believe me, through COVID, as a teacher and watching students, the productivity level of people dropped dramatically during working at home. And I know there's many benefits as stated in the report, but I have a hard time supporting that part of it just because I've lived it. And unless there's a pandemic, I don't see any reason why a worker shouldn't come into work. Just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so getting back, we're going to add that amendment to it about staff. Do you want to do that
We can
separate?
take it as a friendly amendment. I think that's reasonable, and just add it as staff direction
And they'll
to
come
bring back that report.
next meeting.
Yep.
Okay, so it gets dealt with in a timely manner. Okay, so that is a friendly amendment, and it's been added. Any further discussion on this?
Yeah, Mr.
Councillor Longo, you had your hand up. No? Okay.
Like,
Go ahead,
I
Councillor.
agree with what Henry's saying, but I don't agree with the report, just from hybrid working. Can't we keep them separate?
We can vote
They all
on
come, why do they come together as one?
Okay.
Yep, Mr. Mayor, if you'd like to do them separate, then let's deal with the report for
first.
now, and we'll deal with the other
Got
after.
a mover and a seconder on that, and we'll deal with that first. The report, any further discussion on the report, then we'll deal with that. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Lyon. Did you have any discussion on the report? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. I fully support this hybrid work policy. We have been through a terrible time with COVID. Many people worked at home. There have been some difficult situations. I know also as a former teacher that many of my colleagues, like Councillor DeRose, did struggle with their students. However, professionally, at a different level of stay-at-home workers, there was a great deal of productivity. We could see that life went on through a very difficult time, and amazing things were achieved, specifically here in Thorold, all the amazing tasks that were undertaken and completed in that time. So there is great productivity as well that can be achieved. And now that we are beyond COVID to a degree, there have been many studies from different perspectives of the positive sides to the hybrid work policies that many companies have implemented. Everything from, more healthy home time because of the loss of this need to drive to work. There's even studies, believe it or not, that report that there's less stress at home because there are opportunities to take breaks. There are productivity reports that show that the productivity has also increased in some various degrees. So we get both sides of the spectrums. It might depend on which area is utilizing the hybrid work policy. But I think, especially in this day and age, people are used to it. People are hoping to access it. And let's face it, if someone comes applying for a job at the city and one of the questions is, how's your hybrid work policy? And if we don't have it, then we may be losing out on valuable workers who may wish to work for the city. So I see it as a positive tool, and I fully support it. Thank you.
Councillor Hanley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I myself, I have a tough time supporting it myself, especially when it says a few days a week, and I have a tough time supporting it for the fact there's also studies out there that show that individuals who were working from home have been what you might say double dipping and engaging in enterprising while working at home, because now they have the time at home to not only do what they're to do for the corporation, but there's studies out there that show that people have actually been what you might call double dipping, being paid by a corporation to be at home and running businesses on the side, internet businesses. So I want to see a policy that protects the city for that and has stipulations in regards to that. How are we going to monitor that the individuals actually working at home for a specific period of time? Is it 2 hours a day while they're at home? Is it 4 hours a day? Is it 6 hours a day? Are they paid salaried employees? Is there a policy for them? Does the policy state who and who cannot work from home? We may end up in a predicament here where 75% of our employees want to work from home, and there'll be nobody to service the city or be there for customer assistance. So it has its positives and it's got its negatives too. And one of the big negatives I see in the studies I found is people engaging in business activities outside their duties for who they're committed to. And it's a proven fact. That's been one of the things during COVID especially. A lot of people started by home or from home businesses while working for other entities. So if we're going to have a policy, I would have loved to seen the policy more detailed. How are we going to monitor their work hours? Do we regulate that they can engage in enterprising businesses while during city time? I don't see any of that. So I have concerns and I won't support the policy myself because I believe, yes, there was a COVID and now COVID's being used as my reasoning is an excuse to run your business home because it's less stressful and so on and so forth. But sure, it's got its positives and it's got its negatives, but I believe that this is just going to end up into a rotating crisis for the city, and we're going to have more employees one day working from home than we will at City Hall. So who dictates, if I may ask you, Mr. Mayor, how are we going to dictate who works at home and who doesn't? What does the policy state in regards to that? Is the clerk going to be able to work from home? Is the human resources going to be able to work from home? Is the director of finance going to be able to work from home? Is
Okay,
the director of
I'll get the
communications going to be
question
able to work
answered.
from home? Who are we going to decide who gets to work from home?
Thank you for the question, and I'll turn it over to our CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have our manager of human resources here as well, so we can add on. A couple of things that I want to bring it to consideration. We are the only municipality in Niagara doesn't have that this policy. That's number one. Number two, there is a extensive procedure that is associated with this policy, which is what staff or senior staff are going to utilize in ensuring who can work from home, how long they can go work from home, and what are the built-in checks and balances in the system there as well. What we have find from our recruitment and retention policy perspective, that there are a number of people who have denied coming to us because we don't have that policy. There are people who I understand have left because we don't have that kind of flexibility. So that's some of the constraints. In terms of who decides, yes, it is the responsibilities of the department heads and directors and the managers to make sure that one thing is for sure what we have put in the procedure, that no additional workforce is required because of this policy. And second thing is there are checks and balances in the process. The reason why we have not brought a whole comprehensive procedure associated with this policy and kept procedure and policy separate, because we don't want, if the procedures are changing, we have to bring it back to council all the time. So there is extensive procedure at the back end as well, which has built-in checks and balances, who can work from home and who cannot, and then how we are monitoring their progress or their whether they are productive or not. And also, it is not the right of the individual that they can demand. It is the management right to allow. And then there are, as I said, there is an extensive procedure associated with it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Decker and then Councillor.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'll support this this policy. I do have a question though. Are there going to be times when the employee is expected to come into the office like once a week or twice a week? I know my sister works from home, but she's expected to go into the the main office once or twice a week. Is this something that the senior management will decide, or?
Through Mr. Mayor, it's not that work from home policy means that someone can work from home for the entire 1 week. That's not the case. They can work from home on specific dates based on the sign off from the managers, the department head, and ultimately, there are checks and balances. It's not that you're working from home in that you are working from home. They can work from home maximum, I guess, 2 days. Manager of human resources can correct me if I'm wrong.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is a maximum of 3 days, but that's not a guarantee of 3 days. So basically, staff can put in an application, and it's considered by their supervisor or their department head. What they have to consider is all the applications or all the requests, and ensuring that there's a balance of staff within the department at any given time. In addition, if they are required to attend for any particular specific reason, that on a day that would typically be their work from home day, they would be required to attend the city for that meeting and for that time. Also, if it determines that productivity is an issue or performance is an issue, that opportunity can be revoked. So it's not something that they can continually do throughout time. There is going to be, a duration, and it's going to be reevaluated to determine whether or not performance is continuing to be positive and good. And if it's becoming an issue, then perhaps that individual is not going to be able to continue in that program.
Okay. Yeah. Councillor Avidas. Yes. I'm going to get it. I'm working on it. Give me
through you,
some
Mr.
time.
Mayor, I support this because if we want to get the best people in Thorold, we have to play ball. And so many professionals I know, including my brother, they took these big jobs because they had the ability to work from home a couple days a week. Everyone's doing it. We have to do it too. We have to compete. The citizens of Thorold deserve the best people possible in these positions, and we're not going to get them if we don't do the exact same like everyone else is doing.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak on this? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, now we have the other part of that. Regarding the issue with the.
Yep, that's right. So you can, I believe, Councillor D'Angelo would like to move the direction to staff to bring forward a report at the next meeting containing a cost for replacement equipment for councillors.
Okay, and I need a seconder for that, Councillor Sentence. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I just have to go back to 12.4. I know we passed that, but it was one of the items I should have put on the list because I have a conflict with one of the checks that had been issued, so I just want that noted for the minutes.
That is noted.
And then I had a couple questions. I won't ask too many questions, but it's regarding the accounts payable. But I want to note that there's a check number 123833, if I'm reading this correctly. It's a JBM Office Systems. My brother works for JBM Office Systems, so I wanted to declare a conflict on that particular check that's being issued to that company. Sorry for that. I should have mentioned that earlier, Mr. Mayor. My apologies.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to items for consideration.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, could I also ask two questions on that report?
It's already passed and gone.
I'll bring
Can
it
you
under.
deal with
I'll bring
staff?
it under a.
Can you ask staff and offline about those questions, please? Thank you. Okay, items for consideration. DS 35 2023, application to the Housing Accelerator Fund. Is there a mover and a seconder for this report? Can I get a mover and a seconder? I got Councillor O'Hara and Councillor Decker. Okay, and I'll turn this over to George. Who's bringing this one forward? Jason Simpson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendations of this report are: 1, that staff be authorized to apply to the Housing Accelerator Fund, known as the HAF, which is being administered by the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. And 2, that staff be directed to implement the actions and initiatives included in the application as it relates to land use planning and development approvals to accelerate the supply of housing. That concludes the recommendations of the report.
Thank you. Is there any questions for staff regarding that? Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my questions will be to staff, and then I'll make a comment. So at this point, it looks like Thorold builds approximately 990 houses a year. And could we agree that we struggle with staff in order to attain those numbers in terms of planning and development approvals and building permits and building inspections? Do we struggle, or do we have enough staff at this point to do this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we are certainly short-staffed at this point in time. We're hoping to be able to be at full complement in the near future.
Okay, thanks for that. I have a hard time supporting this. It says it's going to relate to land use planning and development approval. So we're going to fast track these things, by the sounds of it, to build more houses. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think Thorold does its fair share of providing housing. I don't know how this is going to help us in any way. We have a hard time keeping up with the demands of all this increased housing in terms of supporting the infrastructure that we put in place. We're falling behind, and this is just going to make us fall behind further. I don't think this is wise. I will not support it. I'm not sure if other councillors will, but that's my feeling on it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor O'Hara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Simpson. Does any of the $2.4 million that will be eligible for, can any of that be earmarked to personnel as well, to new hires, as Councillor Longo has pointed out?
Through the Mayor, I'd like to actually refer that question to our Manager of Economic Development, Ken Schultens, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor O'Hare. The CMHC funding envelope through the Housing Accelerator Fund leaves it very much up to the discretion of the municipality to determine how to best adequately use those funds to meet the initiatives. That can include the onboarding of additional staff if required to undertake those initiatives.
Thank you. Great answer.
Are there any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor DeAngelo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I was reading through the report here. If we do apply for this, can we just put a caveat that it's only to be used for affordable housing units as opposed to just general housing? If we're specifically trying to get that type of housing into our community, non-profit housing, affordable housing, attainable housing, whatever word you want to use, if we could put it to there, I don't see expediting regular housing. It's a boom here where houses are being put up like crazy, but it's the affordable ones that we don't have a lot going up right now. Is that something we could just apply to just as an internal policy of just utilizing the funds for that?
I can ask Ken to respond to that if he can.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor DeAngelo, the way that the Housing Accelerator funding envelope is designed is to specifically address what they're referring to as that missing middle of housing. So that is that housing which are typically seen as row town, stack towns, duplexes, and triplexes. There is a separate funding mechanism within this funding envelope to address specifically affordable housing. However, as part of the application process, you have to clearly articulate how you're going to use that funding to create new affordable housing units. And affordable housing is defined as the definition by the CMHC. So there's two mechanisms through the half. One is for that missing middle to accelerate housing, and the other envelope is to specifically incentivize affordable housing.
So for me, I'm agreeable to the affordable housing. Anything that's beyond the affordable, I don't think we should be accelerating that. I think we have enough of that going on. It's the affordable. So if you could capture it, I'll be supportive of the report if that's the case.
How do we capture that? That's the question. Can I get a response from staff regarding that? Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it may be wise to suggest that the Housing Accelerator Fund application that staff submit include an affordable housing component, since it is a part of the application process.
Okay. Councillor O'Hare, do you want to comment on that?
No, another question? Can I ask?
Well, let's first try and get this resolved.
All right.
So as part of the application process, we can highlight that that's a priority?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what we can do is, in the application process, is include an initiative that is to support the creation of new affordable housing units and to allocate funding through the half to support that initiative.
I'm okay with that because that's where we're going to be directing the funds if we get some.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Longo. Do you
I
want
think-
on that? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor O'Hare, and then I'll go to you. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Schultens. I also like this one aspect of the plan, the supporting developments of complete communities that are walkable. So we've talked about this before, that within Thorold we have many communities where it's just house after house, road after road, and nothing there. So this, I assume, is going to help encourage that some of these neighborhoods have these complete community aspects where there's gathering points, stores, schools perhaps. How does that work with the developers? So how does receiving this money then become invested in these communities that we'd like to build so that they're more full communities?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor O'Hare. The staff will put forward an application to CMHC to apply to the Housing Accelerator Fund. in which those initiatives will outline how staff intend to use those funds. That could be used to, say, inform policy, and I will use an example of pre-zoning that requires certain amenities to be included within a site plan or a plan of subdivision in order to be sort of fast-tracked or supported by staff, as an example.
So does that mean that part of that money is invested with the developer to create this, or part of that money is used to formulate plans?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the funding provided through the staff would either be going directly into the infrastructure upgrades required to support housing or community development. So that's the increase of parkland, sidewalks, water, wastewater management, but it can also be used to inform the policies that need to be developed. So the one example that I will use is that as part of the Housing Accelerator Fund application, the City of Thorold would be required to undertake a housing needs assessment. So that is where that funding could be used to identify where, what type of housing is required, and use the HAF funding to support that.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Ken, when you were saying this is the missing middle, was that the stacked townhomes you talked about?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dedivitis, the CMHC defines the missing middle as semi-detached housing. So that does include row homes and stacked towns, as well as up to apartment buildings that are 4 stories or less.
Yeah, I'm going to support this because we need that in Thorold. And that's a new trend going through Ontario. It gets people into homes at a $500,000 mark. They own something. We have to put, this is very important to the province. I totally support that.
Thank you. I had Councillor Sentence and then Councillor Long.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ken. I liked your answers on being able to use money for staff, and which we're very short of, and being able to use it for affordable housing. So I will support this. Thank you.
Councillor Long, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to jump in. Like, if I really thought we could hire the staff, it would be great. We can't hire staff. I spoke with the CEO on the phone today. We can't find planning staff. It's impossible to find and compete with. That being said, if we could funnel this money directly towards affordable housing, I'd be supportive, but I don't believe we can by what I read. It talks about bonus funding for the increase of affordable housing, but you still have to commit to these 99 additional housing units by 2026. And if the builders aren't going to build it, you're not going to get affordable housing. And just to talk about these stacked townhouses, it seems like every new development plan that comes forward in Thorold is stacked townhouses. It's a new phrase that has high density, and we build a lot of stacked townhousing. If you want to call that attainable housing, that's great, but it's still very expensive. It's not helping people try to get in the market. It's still extremely tough. And again, I go back to the City of Thorold cannot keep up with the infrastructure that we have put in place, these new houses. We don't have enough staff to cut the grass in the new parks we have. And this is just going to increase that. So again, if we could take $2.4 million and allocate it towards affordable housing, I'd be all for it, but that's not what this is. So unfortunately, I will not support it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. I had a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Up next, FES 2 2023 St. Catharines Fire Dispatch Agreement. Can I get a mover and a seconder before I get our fire chief to put that on the floor? Okay, I got Councillor Decker moving it and Councillor O'Hara seconding it, and I'll turn this over to Chief Terry Dixon.
Thank you, Mary. Through you. Recommendations from staff is that council approve the renewal of the dispatch agreement with the City of St. Catharines for dispatch services for a term of 15 years, commencing January 1st, 2023 and expiring December 31st of 2037. And that council authorize the mayor and the clerk to sign the dispatch agreement with the City of St. Catharines. That concludes the report.
Thank you, and now I'll open the floor for questions to our chief. Go ahead, Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll support this, but I just have a question. Why if you add up to 15 years times 3%, and if you compound it, it's just a huge increase above what inflation should be set at. But is there a reason why they want you to commit to that increase, Terry?
The reasoning for their increasing of that significance was for their upgrade to the next-gen 911 system that they're putting in. So St. Catharines has upgraded their whole system to what's called VersaTerm. And so all partners that are involved now with across the region that belong to St. Catharines Fire have the same increases equally across the board.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. PWCS 76-2023 CN Rail Track Repairs Ellenberg. Can I get a mover and a seconder before I turn this over to Jeff Holman? I have Councillor D'Angela and Councillor Decker seconding it. Okay, and I'll turn this over to Jeff Holman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation is one that council approve the required upgrades to the CN Railway crossings on Henderson Street and Barron Road. And two, the council allocate funding in the amount of $80,000 from the Capital Asset Transportation Reserve.
And is there any questions regarding this report? Go ahead, Councillor D'Angelo.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Part of the 80,000 is 5,000 for staff. Is that additional costs that's being allocated to a staff member, or are we just allocating staff costs to the 80,000? If you look at the report, it's part of the 80,000.
I'll ask Jeff to answer that.
Through Mr. Mayor, there's an additional $5,000 that we allocated towards staff time that would be used to properly set up road closure and detour signage.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions regarding this report? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. PWCS 77-2023 Farmers Market. Can I get a mover and a seconder for this report? I've got Councillor O'Hara and Councillor Sentence, and I'll turn this over to Jeff Holman.
Here, Mr. Mayor, the recommendation is one, that a budget overrun of $9,841 plus HST be approved for enhancements to the community market, and two, that the overrun be funded from the strategic plan reserve.
Okay, and I'll open the floor for questions regarding this. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. I have up next notice of motion. Call on Councillor DeRose for his notice of motion. He will be seeking to consider this motion this evening, and that would require, first of all, state what the motion is, and then we'll vote on whether we are going to waive the procedure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to provide a notice of motion respecting an amendment to Section 401 of the cemetery bylaw, bylaw number 2072-96. Additionally, I believe this matter is time sensitive, so I'd like to move that this item be considered this evening in accordance with Section 11.2 of the Municipal Act, waiving the notice requirements. So I would appreciate my fellow councilors' support. Thank you.
Okay, so that would require a 2/3 vote. The mover is Councillor DeRose. Can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Sentence, okay. And so we need a 2/3 vote to waive the procedure. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. I can't see Councillor. Okay. Okay, that's carried, so now you can put the motion on the floor, Councillor Drew.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that 4.1 of bylaw 2072-96 be amended as follows. The director shall have charge, 4.1, sorry, the director shall have charge of the sale of all interment rights and of all cemetery supplies and services provided by the corporation, and will determine which and in which order lots, niches, and crypts are available for sale of interment rights. And then an addition is 4.11. The purchaser shall not have a right of selection of lots, niches, or crypts. 4.12. The director shall not sell interment rights to an unopened area of the cemetery prior to selling out currently opened areas.
Okay, so that is the notice of motion, and now, I know, but I'm gonna open the floor for anyone that has,
Can I
well,
add
first
on
of
to
all,
that?
you can
Yeah.
speak, and then I'll
Okay.
open the floor.
Sorry, could we
So-
just confirm the seconder for the motion?
Yeah, basically.
Wait,
Oh,
you're
go
moving it, I had a seconder, it was, Councillor Sentence.
Or Rita.
It might not have been the original one, but no. Okay, go ahead.
Can I speak to it? Yeah. So I consulted with several neighboring communities and public cemeteries throughout the Niagara region and even throughout Ontario. Specifically St. Catharines, I had a nice rapport with their staff, and they have similar wording for their bylaw, which is common across Ontario, and we, working with Matthew, we've adopted it specifically for our public Lakeview Cemetery. Thank you.
Does anyone else like to speak to that? Go ahead, Councillor O'Hare.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just want to say tolerance, acceptance, compassion. These are things that we need to remember and live by. I fear that this bylaw will will exclude residents of Thorold from being able to lay their loved ones to rest in our cemetery. This is unfair to our citizens who live here, who contribute. And I'll just go on record saying that I think it's a sad day if we pass this and restrict Thoroldites from being able to use our cemetery as it is meant to be used. It's a large cemetery. We have room for everybody. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Does anyone else would like to speak on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Well, did you want to speak, Councillor Decker?
I
I'm
did
sorry.
through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to echo Councillor O'Hare's sentiments. I agree that it should be a place for anyone, and that sometimes you have to make decisions based on emergencies and that, and I feel like the wording would not allow that to happen. So I'm not going to support that change.
Councillor Hanley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think we're excluding anybody. Our cemetery is a public cemetery. It's not private. Anybody and everybody has a right to interment at the City of Thorold. We also must remember that under the Cemetery Act, I believe from the research that I find that the Act actually prohibits any differentiation or exclusion, and that it's actually under the Cemeteries Act, I can just say that to have sections that is discriminatory and illegal under the Ontario Human Rights Code. So the code allows anybody to be buried in a public cemetery, but what the code says that anybody being buried in a public cemetery cannot be segregated in a specific area of a cemetery. That only can be done in private cemeteries. And that can't be done in a public cemetery. When we have a public cemetery, we're not excluding anybody. You're allowed to be buried there. And we're following, I believe, this is just in line with the Ontario Cemeteries Act. And if you read the act, it's illegal to segregate public cemeteries. You can only do it in private cemeteries. So I just wanted to add that sentiment, and I will support Councillor Rhodes' motion.
Is there anyone else? Thank you, Councillor Hanley. Is there anyone else that wants to speak to it? Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a little concerned that it sounds like if I support this, I'm trying to exclude people, and that's the last thing I would want to do. Our cemetery, since its inception, has been about inclusion. There are many different people buried there from different ethnic origins, different religions, and I think what could have happened was we could have had segregation, which creates exclusion. So I think we need to continue to run our cemetery the way it's been run for 150 years or however old it is. I don't see why we would change it for any one group, no matter what that group was. So again, it's not about exclusion in my eyes. It's actually about inclusion, to have everybody treated equally. So that's just my comment. Thank you.
Councillor Sentence.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel the same way. I did not view this as exclusion. I didn't view this as taking away anything. I thought this just cleaned everything up so that everybody has the same opportunity. I saw it as inclusion myself. I just see it as, not because other cities are doing it, I just saw it as more inclusive, with our staff being able to make decisions based on this. So yeah, I definitely don't want to keep anyone out. I'm all for inclusion, so that's why I'm supporting it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor D'Angelo.
Given the discussion, I think I have to say the same comments as my past two councillors here. I'm not here about exclusion. This is about giving everyone the same opportunity to be buried either in the ground or hopefully in a new mausoleum that has spaces for those. So it's not about exclusion. I think it's treating everyone fairly and equally. So I wasn't going to say anything, but until I heard some comments saying that we're excluding people, I think it has to be clear out there, there's no exclusion here. It's about treating everyone the same.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor O'Hare, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to talk about exclusion, which is what this will lead to, because we're looking at it from a Christian point of view, and there are other faiths that don't or have different practices, and some of those practices are not what we're used to. So to call it exclusion, to not call it exclusion when you don't allow a certain group to utilize the cemetery as it was meant to, simply because their religion requires that they be buried together. To take that away means they won't have a resting place for their loved ones here in Thorold. There is no other opportunity. In Niagara, there is one, I'll give you an example. In Niagara, there is one Muslim cemetery, and that Muslim cemetery is filling up. There is going to be no more room. In fact, anyone that does not have a Niagara Falls address cannot be buried in that cemetery. So where do our Thorold residents have to bury their Muslim brothers and sisters, sons and daughters? They have to go to Hamilton. That's the closest cemetery for them, and that's not fair. We have the room. We need to look at this differently and be open-minded and make things work so that we can allow them to lay their loved ones to rest here. It's not segregation. They're in our cemetery beside another group of residents who are laid. It's just what their religion requires from them. So we're going to take that away if we pass this bylaw, and they will have to go somewhere else. And that's not fair.
Thank you, Councillor Hanley. Councillor Hanley.
Hey, Mr. Mayor. Again, council needs, we have to consider what the laws are under the Ontario Cemeteries Act. And the Cemetery Act clearly states that cemeteries, public cemeteries, cannot have segregated areas because it could lead to discrimination under human rights, because then we would be liable for other sectors to also come. Yes, we must remember the cemeteries are public, they're not private. They have every opportunity to be buried in that cemetery. As Councillor Longo said, it's been the same for 150 years. And again, I'll reiterate, under the Cemetery Act, it is illegal for public cemeteries to have segregated areas. I just want to make that clear. I've researched this substantially. I could find no municipalities in the Niagara region, public ones, that segregate their cemeteries. They're all open to the public for anybody to be buried. We're not excluding anybody. And again, under the Cemetery Act, you cannot segregate cemeteries. It prohibits that act. It prohibits exclusion of preference based on their race, religion, nationality. All are allowed to be there. So it's not about segregation. It's not about exclusion. Our cemetery is a public cemetery and it's open to everybody. So I want to say that. I'm going by what the Cemetery Act says.
Thank you, Councillor.
And it says that legally we cannot segregate a public cemetery. Only a private cemetery can be segregated.
Thank you.
No other comment.
Is there anyone else? Before we vote, can you put the motion on the floor? I have one question I want to ask Councillor DeRose because I'm not clear on one thing here. This part that I have a problem with is that the corporation will determine which and in what order lots, niches, and crypts are available. So the reason why I have this, you have existing parts in the cemetery that are currently being used for burials. And when a loved one dies, the family usually goes out and picks a plot in that existing area, which I did personally when my parents passed away. According to what that says, we won't be able to do that anymore. That part I have a problem with because I do think if it's an existing part of the cemetery that we're burying in and a person wants to pick a spot, I think that we should give them the freedom to do that. So, which we do now. So we wouldn't be changing anything we're doing. Are you open to that?
100%, Mr. Mayor. Yes.
Okay.
I think in consultation with Director of Operations or the corporation, yes.
Yeah,
100%.
okay. So
Yeah, that's my intention.
I just want, because I knew that wasn't your intention,
No.
but I wanted to make sure
right.
that was still allowed. It's the same thing in a mausoleum. They
Right.
go in and they
Right.
say, can I have that spot if it's open?
Right.
You know what I mean? Okay, so that part will be, go ahead, Councillor DeAngelo, and then Councillor Sen.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, I agree with you 100%. And if you want to buy 6 spots in a row next to each other so everyone's together in that family, you can do so. You just have to pay for the 6 spots, and then that could be the grouping that you want. So by having this, you're allowed to do that. I think what we're trying to somewhat restrict, and that's the Director of Operations, is the cemetery is huge. You don't want to start putting plots all over the place. You want to work with a certain section, fill that up, and then move to the next one, because there's maintenance costs, there's road costs, there's everything else. So that's just prudent public management of money, but you're still given that opportunity. Once that section's full, you go to another one, and if you want 20 family plots, you can get 20 family plots. I did the same thing with my parents. They chose a crypt as opposed to the ground, and they got their 2 spots, right? So, and they're next to each other. So I
my
see that as
concern is I just want to make sure we're still going to be able to do that.
Yeah, I'm with Councillor Longo. There shouldn't be any change here. It's just the
No.
strengthening of it.
I'll get Councillor Sentence and then I'll go there to Councillor Longo and then I have Councillor Decker. Go ahead, Councillor Sentence.
Yeah, I agree with your amendment there, or Mr. Mayor, or keeping things the same. But to me, it was all about using up the spaces that are there now and then moving to the next one and moving to the next one. It wasn't about keeping people out. And people, a Muslim family could buy 20 20 plots, couldn't they? Or if they're available in one area, or any religion, I shouldn't say any particular one. If they're available, you can buy many in a row. Is that correct?
Through Mr. Mayor, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Longo, did you want to add something?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Glad Councillor D'Angelo pointed it out, because I read it too, it didn't make sense. I believe what it should say is the purchaser shall have a right of selection of lots, niches, and crypts. But it needs to be in areas of the cemetery that are currently open.
Yeah, within current,
Absolutely.
we can add that.
So you could go in and purchase 100 plots if you wish. So I believe just the word shall, the word not should be taken out. Because the next line talks about currently opened areas.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor. So, and perhaps what's missing from this, Mr. Mayor, would be perhaps it should say the seller will not be guaranteed the right of selection because there's no guarantee of what is available, and that's what's missing. And that's the language that we've seen in other bylaws where this originally came from. So it can be removed, it can be not a guarantee. I think what you're trying to say is there may be some selection of what is available, but that's not a guarantee because it depends on what is open and currently being sold. So perhaps you can set that to, it's up to the mover and seconder of the motion, whether or not they'd like to remove the line altogether, change the not, or have it.
Yeah, I think just take the word not out, Matthew, if possible, and maybe put what you said about guaranteed, because like you said, it was in the other bylaws from other communities. But yeah, I don't want to take people's right to choose, just as Terry said. Thank you.
Yeah. If you take that line out and just put the second line, the line speaks to an open section of the cemetery. So you're not causing any undue restrictions.
You could add to the discretion of cemetery staff.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that's covered by we'll determine which and in what order lots, niche crypts are available for sale. So that would be to the discretion of staff.
Yeah. Okay, are we good with that? With that other line taken out? Go ahead, Councillor Decker.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, then why are we changing it? Are we not doing that now at the cemetery?
I know, but it wasn't in writing type of thing. Right? It wasn't in the policy, okay? Or that's the reason. Okay? Anyone else? Before we go to Councillor, go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I just ask for a recorded vote on this, please?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Seeing none, we're going to a recorded vote, and I'll turn it over to our city. Jeff, go ahead. Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, just for clarification purposes, 4.11 talks about not being able to sell any additional plots until a new section is opened. It ties my hands as a director with respect to sales, because basically it reduces the inventory that we have available, and if people don't want to purchase those remaining lots, we may be in a situation where we have to turn people away. Is that the intention?
It's a good comment. Go ahead, Councillor D'Angelo.
Well, Mr. Mayor, that just goes to opening a section of the cemetery. If you only have 6 plots left and I'm going to use section A, now you can open up section B that probably has 200 lots, right? So in the 200, you could, under my assumption is that you could select any of the 200 in that new section that's been now opened up. You can't go to section F and say, I want section F. That's what I think we're trying to achieve here, So that's not tying the director's hands. If someone comes in wanting 30 plots and there's only 12 left, he can say, yes, you can go to the next section and take 30 because the 12 were not, you didn't have 30 in section A.
I know that there's always a couple of sections open at a time. You know, we're not restricted to one section. There's usually plots open. I know from my own experience when I had to go from my parents, I had a choice between a couple of different sections because they were active at the time. You know where there was 2 sections active at that time anyways. So if we fill one up, then we can open another. We should always have a couple of sections active, I would think. I don't know. I'm just saying. I don't want to tie staff's hands, you know. Go ahead, Councillor Tucker.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, shouldn't it then be the Director of Community Services decision?
Well, it'd fall under Jeff's, that person answers to Jeff. He's the director of the whole department.
Mr. Mayor, I'm mindful of our cemetery service delivery review, which encourages us to have a more proactive approach to making lots available for the community and planning ahead of time. We have a number of sections that have irrigation systems and are pinned that are vacant but technically open and available for sale. While we encourage people to locate in areas so that from a maintenance perspective it's much more efficient to operate, I wanted to make sure that there was clarity about if someone prefers to purchase a lot in a particular section that is available, that they can do that without having to worry about, making a formal announcement or getting direction about whether that section should be opened.
Councillor Hanley has his hand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I believe the last time I looked at the cemetery, we have sections, just as councillors have pointed out, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. I just a little while ago was looking at whether me and my wife are going to buy a couple plots and that stuff, and there is a large, significant amount of plots available that have current infrastructure there. We have years and years supply already at hand. We're nowhere getting close to not having appropriate areas that are currently have roadways, that currently have infrastructure. That's what the intent of this is. We need to do that, and as the cemetery fills, we will move in a northerly direction because that's the way the cemetery is currently going. The cemetery started on the south end. We're moving to a northerly direction, at the same time to an easterly direction, and our western direction cemetery is going through the gates to the old cemetery, and it is my understanding that we've discussed this in the past, that the old cemetery may in fact be opening or is already open for the sale of plots at a premium rate because of the availability there for plots. So we're nowhere close to being running out of lots or being able to turn anybody away with the current infrastructure, the current plan that's there. I've seen it. It's A, B, C, D, and F, and G, and H. There is a significant amount of available plots there today without us having to putting in more infrastructure or expanding beyond what's already available, the current stock. I guarantee you there's 200 plus there right now, and it's going to take a while to fill them up. So we're not segregating anything here, or we're not running out of room, believe me. We definitely aren't. So I just want to get, and again, I'm going to reiterate, under the Cemetery Act, this bylaw is following the Cemetery Act as per the law. It's a non-segregated cemetery. We got lots of room. I've been out there. Plenty. Hundreds of plots are available right now.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hanley. Anyone else before we go to take this vote? Go ahead, Councillor Seth.
Sorry, so Mr. Mayor, just before we continue, you've had a number of councillors have spoken twice. Some have now spoken 3 times, which the procedural bylaw does not allow for. Okay. So I would recommend you see if anybody who has not spoken has anything they wish to add to the conversation before calling the vote.
I see none, so I'll call the question.
So, Mr. Mayor, recorded vote has been requested. As we did it last time, we will first call on the mover and seconder of the motion and then go in alphabetical order. Councillor DeRose?
For.
Councillor Sentence?
Can you put the new wording up so we can see it?
I'll just confirm that that's the appropriate wording with the mover and seconder. Mover, Councillor DeRose, seconder, Councillor Sentence.
For.
Councillor D'Angelo?
I'm in for, but I think we have to review the policy on how we,
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, there's no debate during a recorded vote.
Well, you can bring back something if you want further, after the,
procedural bylaw does not speak on how we do recorded votes. And alphabetically, always throws certain people at the top. One is at the top.
Gotta turn his mic, but can't hear him.
anyway, you're up next.
Councillor DeVitis.
For.
Councillor Decker.
Against?
Councillor Hanley.
For.
Councillor Longo.
In favor.
Councillor O'Hare.
Opposed.
Mr. Mayor.
For.
Mr. Mayor, that carries.
Okay. Okay, up next, we have Councillor O'Hare for his notice of motion. This again will require waiving the procedure. It's respecting the frog pond maintenance. You want to give us a quick tidbit before we see if
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just a notice of motion regarding having staff prepare a report. Regarding the frog pond, there has been some loss of trees on the plot. The pond itself has suffered immensely, and just would like an update on not only the condition, but what brought us to this point.
Okay, so that is what he wants to waive, and you want this as time sensitive? So you want to deal with it tonight, or is this for next meeting?
This is for next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that'll be for next meeting. You'll work with the clerk on that, okay? There was a digital notice board that you had, Councillor O'Hare, and do you have a seconder? Councillor D'Angelo.
No, Mr. Mayor, are you leaving notice of motions?
No, I'm doing these two, and then we're gonna go,
Well, the digital notice board is a motion. I thought we're still in
oh,
notice
it's
of
from
motions.
notice of motion from last time? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, notices of motion, go ahead. We'll finish that, go ahead.
Okay, thank you,
Yeah,
Mr.
because I'm sorry, you have a notice of motion, yes.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, but it's a time-sensitive one. It's regarding 1375 Egerton Road. It's regarding an order for bylaw clean yards that an invoice was issued for them. I'm looking for a staff report regarding this issue, and it's time-sensitive because of the enormity of the invoice. So if I could have, like...
You would want that
I'm
back?
looking for a waiving of the procedural bylaw so I could get that onto the floor.
Okay, so then we need a waiver of the, I have a mover and I have a seconder, Councillor Longo. All those in favor to waive the procedure? That is carried. Okay, so now you can bring the...
Yeah, I'm just going to keep it simple, Mr. Mayor, because this individual did meet with staff. There is some, there was an invoice that was issued, but there's some irregularities and some issues that occurred during the cleanup. And I think staff is aware of these issues because they're now implementing new protocols regarding consistent, fair, and taking concerns of citizens into consideration when they're looking at bylaw work orders. So I would like to send this to staff so they could do a report to council regarding this particular issue. I know staff is looking at revamping the whole bylaw or revamping the bylaw to bring it back to council at a further date. But this one is specific, and it has a specific invoice that's tied to it from the company of, I think it's Urge the Purge. So I just want to make sure that staff deals with this, because we have the August meeting, and if we don't meet the August deadline, then it's like September 12th is the next.
So you want this brought back at the next meeting, am
At the
I
next
correct?
meeting, yes.
Okay, and I had a seconder, Councillor Longo. All those in favor? Opposed, that is carried.
Mr. Mayor, and then I had a secondary one. I'm looking for leave of council also. This one, I brought this up, and it's regarding parking on the apron. There seems to be a lot of confusion out there right now, parking on the apron. I'm a new councillor. I didn't understand the logic of it. We were supposed to get a parking report coming. It hasn't come yet. There's been an extensive amount of work by staff. So what I'm looking for is that we just put the ticketing and the explanation of the parking on the apron on hold until we have that staff report that outlines what we're going to do with the aprons, if we're changing it or not, because some people think they're getting tickets, some people don't. So that's what I'm looking for. It's a time sensitive because people are getting issued tickets.
Can you deal with the parking on the apron as a separate item and get that to council so that we don't have to wait for the whole parking report, because it is an issue that is sensitive? Can you deal
So,
with it?
Mr. Mayor, I maybe could refer this to the city clerk. I know council spoke on this earlier in the year, and I believe council voted to wait on making a decision on parking on the apron until the parking study was completed.
Okay.
So I don't know if that would be considered a reconsideration or not.
Okay. So I don't know what that exact language said regarding that parking, but
Mr. Mayor, I believe, and I'd have to pull up the exact wording, which I can certainly try to do, but I believe that would be a reconsideration, given the fact that it was paused until we get the report back. So perhaps my recommendation would be that at this point it just be a notice of motion, and at which point, if it's a reconsideration, we could deal with that on August 1st. So you'd be pausing ticketing then on August 1st.
Mr. Mayor, just clarity on because it was probably me that brought it up back earlier in the year. Is it a pause on issuing tickets that we waited for, or we were just waiting for the review of the parking bylaw prior to doing anything? I'm looking for clarity on that.
and that's
It's the latter, Mr. Mayor.
it's the latter. It's that waiting for the review.
Okay, so maybe we should have put a time on the review, because it's probably been 4 or 5 months. And this is when people are starting to park
I know.
on their aprons.
Go ahead, Jason.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So in the 2023 budget, council approved that a parking study be done by a third-party consultant. That RFP just went out, or just got advertised, I believe. If it wasn't last week, then this week. So the process is just beginning, so I imagine we'll still be a number of months away before we see the results of that study.
I'm looking for your direction, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to put it on hold until that study comes back.
The problem is, and I'll just explain, because I was here when the apron parking come in. We have a lot of areas in the city where apron parking, the aprons aren't big enough, okay? There's different aprons in the city. Some can fit a car, some can't fit a car. And the ones that couldn't fit a car cause us considerable problem, and especially in some areas of the city, and that was why this bylaw came into effect. But I can fully understand that there's areas in the city where the aprons may be sufficient, and I thought that this would address it. I don't know the answer, but if we put it in abeyance, there's going to be areas that are going to cause us significant grief throughout the city. And Councillor Longo, you know, because you were involved in this as much as I was. So I think that that can cause us just as much grief as the other. I don't have the answer, but it's a problem that we need to address. I agree, because there's different circumstances. Go ahead, Dora.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe when we rewrite the policy to have it, if they're not infringing on the sidewalk or the road, that should be the only time an apron parking is ticketed. That's my opinion. What do you think, Jason?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I just want to be thoughtful of the fact that at the moment, we just have a notice of motion,
Yeah,
and council has
okay.
not gone forward with the 2/3 majority to deal with this tonight. And not knowing the full impacts of the reconsideration, I would recommend, Mr. Mayor, that we leave it at notice and come back on August 1st with the motion.
Okay, so I can leave this with Councillor D'Angelo. If you want to work with the clerk and if you can find some common ground to come back
I'm
on that.
amenable to that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. That's what we'll do then. Okay, I'm on to motions, digital notice board, and I had Councillor O'Hare for his motion, and is there a seconder? I got Councillor Decker, go ahead.
Whereas the City of Thorold aims to enhance communication with its residents and promote community engagement, and whereas a digital notice announcement board would provide an efficient and effective means of disseminating important information, updates, and announcements to the public. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the City of Thorold enacts as follows: that staff be directed to prepare a comprehensive report regarding the installation of a digital notice announcement board within the municipal jurisdiction. That the report include the following considerations: identification of suitable locations within the city for the installation of the digital notice announcement board with an emphasis on high traffic areas and community centers. Examination of available technologies and vendors that provide digital notice announcement board solutions, including their features, costs, maintenance requirements, and potential integration with existing communication systems. Assessment of the financial implications, including the initial investment, ongoing maintenance costs, and potential funding sources such as government grants or partnerships with local businesses, and consideration of any legal and regulatory requirements, including permits, zoning, restrictions, and compliance with accessibility standards.
Thank you. Is there anyone that has any questions or anything regarding that? Go ahead, Councillor D'Angelo.
So this is in addition to the ones we have already that we're looking at doing?
This would be a new digital board at some.
Well, we have two already. We have one in the arena. We have one at the by the pool. That's the Thorold one. So are we not utilizing those? Like, I'm asking, is this like we're looking for more, like putting more of these throughout their city, more than one? Like,
Councillor O'Hare, I think you're looking for one. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'm looking for one main digital announcement board.
Okay. All right. That's.
The staff report will come back and then deal with it, and then council.
I know, but we just keep throwing items, and again, no offense to the councillor, but we keep throwing items, and there's no budget for this. Like, some of this stuff should have been discussed at budget time and thrown there, but I'm willing to. It's beneficial to the community. I'm not going to argue, but.
But if it comes back and there's a cost, it can be referred to budget in 24. I don't think you're adverse to that. No. Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Sen.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we need this. That one at the pool is, when it's working, is so small, and everybody kind of laughs at it as what's going on in the city of Thorold. So I like this idea, and even if it does take a budget time to do it, but we need something like this, like other municipalities. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else want to speak to this? Go ahead, Councillor.
Maybe we can ask staff too if you can sell advertising, help pay for the board. Make it big enough so we can have a little spot we can sell to.
Anyone else? Okay, we had a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Surplus funds raised Canada Day 2023. I'll call on Councillor Decker for a motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor O'Hare. Go ahead, Councillor Decker.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that any surplus funds raised for the Canada Day 2023, above and beyond the funds necessary to put on the event, be transferred to a reserve account set aside for the Canada Day event for 2024.
Okay. Is there any discussion on this? Go ahead, Councillor Dean.
Just for clarity, is this just the Canada Day or is it the 2-day celebration? Just
It's the whole 2-day,
It's the
correct?
2-day celebration?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Statement by Councillor. I have one from Councillor Decker. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it was to thank all those involved in our Canada Day in the park, but you've pretty much mentioned everyone that I was going to mention. So once again, thank you to all our staff and volunteers, Bob Liddycoat, especially on the Friday before. People might not know it, but all day staff was out in the park preparing, getting it ready for our 2-day event, and then the crews throughout the weekend that kept the park clean and the bathrooms clean, and it was great to see all the staff out and celebrating with us. So a huge thank you from myself and the committee.
Thank you so much, Councillor Decker. Okay, closed session. Before I ask for a mover and a seconder to go into closed session, I would like to remind you of your obligations respecting closed session. Those who are participating electronically in the closed session must ensure that no other person is in the location from which they are taking part in the meeting, or make appropriate arrangements so that any other persons cannot see or hear any of the confidential deliberations taking place. If this is not possible, you must withdraw from the meeting until it has been reconvened to open session. The motion is...
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
Just looking at the time and thinking before you put this motion, may I recommend you put a motion to extend the time just prior to going into closed?
Yes, I will put a motion. Can I get a mover and a seconder to go past 10 o'clock? Councillor Sentence, Councillor DeRose, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, so we're going to move into closed session. Go ahead, Councillor Law, did you want?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Procedurally, can I ask why this wasn't on our agenda?
Go ahead, I'll turn it over to City Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, through you, Mr. Mayor, it is on the agenda. However, there were no items attached. These were just confidential verbal updates. Should be listed under section 17.
Okay, I don't see anything, but maybe...
It was there and it left.
Maybe I need a new computer.
Yeah. Anyways, do I need a mover and a seconder before I read this, then we'll do the vote before we go. And I got Councillor Decker and Councillor Didavinas, and that council do move into closed session for the purposes of receiving information of a confidential nature respecting a matter respecting employee negotiations under Section 239 2D of the Municipal Act 2001 compensation, position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality under Section 239 2K of the Municipal Act 2001 Junior B Hockey. Okay, those are just the two items. That's it. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So we're going to move into closed session, and we'll give